They say never ask a whiskey geek for a whiskey recommendation. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think it's all too easy for us to forget where we are in whiskey and the type of things that we're enjoying at that particular moment in time. But tonight I want to consider, what would we say to our beginner self if we could go back and speak to ourselves when we took our first few steps exploring whiskey? That's what we're going to focus on tonight. Hopefully, there's some value in it for beginners, of course, but I think hopefully there's bigger value in it for us as a community and better value in it for us as potential coaches or wherever we are in our journey right now. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you all again, and I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday night. Welcome to the vPub. Hope you're all doing really well. I'm feeling a wee bit better than I was a week ago. I was a wee bit congested, and if I'm honest with you, I still am, just a wee bit, but I'm much better, and I've not felt particularly poorly much in the last week, so I'm fine to be sitting in front of you tonight, and I'm looking forward to another wee relaxed whiskey hangout with everyone on a Thursday night. So, if you're joining live, fantastic. Thank you very much for turning up and joining our company live tonight. And if you're picking this up on the replay, I really do appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who picks this up on the replay. I think that's the point of trying to make the vPubs themed, to give for the folk that don't really get a chance to hang out and chat to each other in the lounge, or the live chat, as we like to refer to it as the lounge. It kind of gives some evergreen value to the vPub. And hopefully, I know that I've been a bit delinquent in recent weeks, but hopefully if I've done my homework, underneath you'll find timestamps, chapter markers where you can skip ahead to the things that you feel might interest you most. Whether you're here live or picking it up in the replay, I'm very, very grateful. I really do look forward to these Thursday night sessions. Honestly, sometimes I wonder what I'd do without them these days. Tonight's topic is, on the face of it, it just looks like, if you caught the thumbnail, it looks like I'm just going to be talking about beginner whiskey. And I'm going to be talking about beginner whiskey, but not holding up bottles and saying, yeah, this is a great beginner whiskey, this is a great beginner whiskey. There's going to be very little of that actually tonight. What I want to talk about, and there are reasons for this, what I want to talk about is how we as a whiskey community today, how we extend a welcoming hand to people coming into the scene today, how we accommodate them, how we relate to them, and how we try to remember what it was like for us when we started. Whether we started on our own exploration, or whether we had a coach or somebody to guide us into things, whether it was a moment of inspiration, whatever it was, there was a moment that we decided that we wanted to explore this thing further, and that's still happening today. I think maybe a wee bit less so than it has in the past, but it's still happening. And I wonder what we're doing in terms of content creation for people like me, in terms of language for people out there in the whiskey community, but also in a case of, from the point of view of accessibility and that kind of welcoming side of things. What kind of language are we using? What kind of tactics, or what kind of things do we do to make whiskey seem appealing? Is it fun? Before we get into all of that, I'm going to ask some questions about why I'm doing this, and I'm going to ask some questions about, is it the right thing to do? And after we've got that out of the way, we can get right on into it. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, I'm going to do what we always do. I'm going to jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Welcome, everyone. Cheers. As always, I'm looking out for orange, so if you type Aquavite or @Aquavite, I should be able to catch your name. Let me pull up a wee extra window here So I've got a backup in case one jumps or freezes. It's always handy to do that. Synchronizing them is the next trick. I'll get to it one day. Hellswood is here. Good to see you, Helen. How are you and Andy doing? And she's saying good evening, Roy. Good evening right back at you both. Herben is here. Fantastic. Petehead Frank is here. David is here as well from Portugal. Island Hopper Stuart is here saying evening, Roy. Good to see you, Stuart. How are you keeping, my friend? Max Kreitner over in Austria saying good evening, my friend. As always, vPub to wind down near the end of the week. It does start to feel a wee bit like the start of the weekend for me. Is that rude? I know we've still got at least one full working day left. I work weekends now. Bruno Martin's in Portugal as well, saying good evening, Roy. Glad to be here once again. Bruno, it's wonderful to welcome you, my friend. And Ryan Sutherland, our pal from 8 Doors Distillery, right up there on the North Coast, is tuning in as well, saying hello, Roy. Ryan, it's fantastic to welcome you on a Thursday, my friend. How's the weather up where you are? It's pretty cold here. Peter is saying good evening, Roy. Good to see you, Frank. And Ryan McLeave is here. Buddy, good to see you. He's saying good evening, Roy Covidi. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well. We are, fella. Hope things are well over Northern Ireland. Tim Pells is saying good evening, Roy. And Gordon Fraser is here too, saying hello from the Misty Isle. Gordon's tuning in from the Isle of Skye. Fantastic to have you, Gordon. Good to have you in, Tim. Great stuff. Julian Rickman is saying, evening, Roy. Evening, Barflies. Always something to learn from a beginner's vPub. I wonder. Let's see how it goes. Julian, I tell you what, you tell me either in the comments underneath or at the end of the session tonight whether you feel like you've picked up anything. But it's going to be a wee bit contemplative, let's say. Graham Young, just as it jumps, Graham, I'm so sorry. I'm going to wind right back up and try and scan for your name. He's saying, hello, Roy. So glad to see you tonight. A dram of the bottle of Wow, Elijah Craig barrel proof in a glass to start warming things up. I wonder if we would consider that a good strategy for a beginner to say, oh, you think you like whiskey, and pour them a glass of close to 70% ABV bourbon. It could be fun, right? Anthony Lambert is saying, good evening all. Dragged myself out of my bed after, out of my sick bed after 5 days of the flu. Hey, I did a very good job of scanning ahead there because there's a wee typo on Anthony's comment there. I managed to delete it, but I now know what he meant. He said he meant to say sick bed. After 5 days of the flu, hoping a pick-me-up dram will help my recovery tonight. Great to be in live with you all. Listen, there's a lot of it going around, my friend. More than anything, make sure you're back to full health. And hopefully, if you are, a wee dram might help you further. Jim M is saying, happy vPub anniversary. Now back to Thanksgiving dinner prep. Yes, I need to say, usually the Thursday nights of Thanksgiving tends to be a wee bit quieter, because obviously all our North Americans are otherwise distracted. We don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Europe. Of course we don't. It's a very North American affair. But for anybody that is celebrating Thanksgiving tonight, happy Thanksgiving. But I also think that whether we celebrate Thanksgiving or not, I think it's nice. It's a nice notion just to be contemplative for a minute and consider the things that we're grateful for. I'm grateful for all of you. Happy Thanksgiving, and it's nice to have you here. Cheers. Thanks, Jim. Mark Slinger is here too. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you're keeping well up there in Speyside, Mark. I think you're a Stillman now, aren't you? Doodle the Dram is saying hello. Aquavita, extra excited for tonight's vPub, as it's real experience time for me, sitting here again amongst all of you who are rocket fueling and supercharging my beginner experience. I think you are an almost perfect subject that I'm aiming the theme towards tonight, Arnie. But my language is not going to be directly to you. I think my language is going to be to the whiskey community as it stands today, as a kind of en masse whole. And obviously we've done very well with you. You're excited about being part of the community and things. You've come in, you don't feel intimidated, you feel welcome, you feel like it's a good place to learn, all of those things. And that's kind of what I'm going to continue to focus the theme on tonight. So it is literally a guide for whiskey geeks. A few drams coming in. Savar, my pal from Iceland, who I believe is in Scotland. I think I caught Savar and Graham Fraser and his pal, Rabbi, was it Rabbi? In the SMWS or somewhere on Facebook. Anyway, Savar, if you are in Scotland, I hope you're enjoying yourself, my friend. And it's nice to have had a wee VIP welcome from Graham Fraser as well, I hope. And Owen Ashford is also joined the Aquavita Barflies as well. Owen and Savar, thank you both for your support. A dram in from my pal Christoph, who's bought me a wee dram to say cheers, Roy and all. Looking forward to the replay. Can't stay long tonight. Now, you're in Europe, my friend, so you are an hour ahead. So if you are picking this up on the replay, welcome back, and thank you for the dram, Christoph. Cheers. Bruce Bernard is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 33 months and saying another Barfly milestone. Thank you for your support, Bruce. All the people that join the Aquavita Barflies through YouTube by clicking the join button, the membership button, you're keeping the vPub and all the content on Aquavita channel henceforth completely ad-free. You don't need to sit through political ads and bizarre whiskey ads and ED ads and all of these things that were bumping up against the content a few years back when I switched that off. The Barflies and the support that they give me through that join button, I make more out of that than I ever did through monetizing the channel back in the day. Ads will never be switched back on again as long as I have your support. So thank you all. Thank you, Bruce. Justin Wands bought me a dram from Hong Kong. He said, just popping in to say hi. Haven't been catching many vPubs live before, and since the Glasgow Whisky Festival, going to have to catch this one on replay as well. Sounds like a great topic. Justin, you're hours ahead of us, my friend. Never need to apologise for not making it, and you don't need to continue to buy me drams, but they are always very appreciated, big guy. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the replay, buddy. Welcome, Justin. Super generous donation from my pal Jimmy Jazz, taking a cooking break to say congrats on 7 years of vPubs. So he's bought me a very appropriate dram, 7777. He sent 7 years of fun and worldwide friendships. Certainly giving thanks to you for all of that, Jimmy. That's a wonderful thing. It really, really is. That's getting lots of love and gratitude from me. Just terrific stuff. Jimmy, it's been a pleasure to get to know you over the years. It's been a pleasure to get to welcome you the amount of times that you visited us here, or bump into you down south or in Europe or wherever it's been. It's incredible to have you, and it's incredible to have your support over the years too, and tonight. Gratitude and gratefulness to you, my friend. Cheers. And happy Thanksgiving to all our American barflies from Alistair Gray up in Speyside, celebrating being a member of the barflies with a pink barfly and 57 months support. Amazing. And George Petras has also joined the barflies and signed up. George, thank you very, very much. If that's the first time I've welcomed you here, it's nice to have you, my friend. Good stuff. Good stuff. Mel is saying good evening and all the barflies. Good to see Mel. I'm not sure I've welcomed you either. And my friend Sean Cosser is here saying, evening, Roy. I'm here 3 years into my journey, so looking forward to tonight. And Tunnel Amendi, he's saying, Aquavita, good evening. The title tonight reminded me of my very first whiskey, a gift, a Connemara. The next one that really made me fall in love with whiskey was Laphroaig Quarter Cask. Interesting. So whether through the Connemara or the Laphroaig, to know you've come right in at the peaty, smoky end of things, which happens more often than we might imagine. Taylor actually's bought 5 Aquavita Barfly memberships out there for 5 lucky random folk. Taylor, thank you very, very much for your support. It's wonderful to have it. And he's also gifted one more as well. Thank you very much, Taylor. And Gav O'Connor is saying congrats on 7 years. Tonight's flight is a Bushmills 15, Thompson Brothers 8, that's the North Highland blend, and finally Lagavulin 12 on a Black Friday deal. Lagavulin 12 special releases has been getting sold for £50. Things that are happening in whiskey right now are pretty seismic. These are changing times. For us as whiskey enthusiasts, as whiskey drinkers, as whiskey consumers, they merely are something to spectate and comment upon. There's nothing for us to feel particularly nervous about, but we do have concerns when we see jobs and things under threat because whiskey is not selling the way that people predicted it would sell. The theme tonight is going to be kind of parallel to that. We have to talk about certain topics tonight before we talk about attracting other people into enjoying whiskey, because we have to do it with a sense of responsibility and understand what we're signing up for, and in order to communicate to other people what they could be signing up for as well. I think that the optimism that has been enjoyed over whiskey over the last 5 to 8 years, certainly through the COVID years, people thought that that would continue, that that trajectory would just continue. And now we're seeing the hangover of that, for want of a better expression, maybe. And I think we're starting to see how much whiskey has been oversold, honestly speaking, in recent years. Now, there's been a lot of investment. There's been a lot of new distilleries. There's been a lot of really exciting things happening through whiskey's golden years, its growth years. It would be nice if these structures and strategies were fortified enough to endure, but we're starting to see that some of them were not. Some of them were not the wisest strategies. Some of them were not as fortified, as strong, as solid as we might have hoped, and we've started to see things crumble a wee bit. Such a shame about Waterford Distillery. Auderty is saying absolutely, that's forefront in my mind as I speak. And Hellswood is saying it resisted the lager on Beza's Shop of Wonder and plumped for the Arboho Society bottling instead. Good for you, Helen. And Max Kreitner is saying congrats to 7 years, and I was lucky enough to be there most of the way. You have been, Max, and you've been a wonderful companion along the way as well. And Taylor actually saying I'm tuning in for a short time and I'll catch the replay later. Thank you very much, Taylor. I hope wherever you're enjoying Thanksgiving night, it goes very, very well for you. And we have Tron, who's also joined Aquavitae Barflies. Thank you very much, Tron, for your support. I think that's the first time I've welcomed you. Nice to have you. Okay, let's get on with this topic tonight. And I want to talk about why first, okay? I want to just mention, and not in a confessional way, it might come across that way, but I just share with you facts that you probably already know. When I started on YouTube, it was kind of at the bottom of a very, very sharp growth curve. And when I talk about that growth curve, I'm not just speaking about the amount of channels that appeared, which there were many, many, many channels, and that's continued. But it was also an explosion of whiskey interest and whiskey curiosity. And it was also coincided with people discovering that there was whiskey content on YouTube as that came along. So we all started, lots of channels started way before me. But when I started, it felt like maybe there was a couple of dozen or 3 dozen channels or something like that. But very, very quickly, it turned into over 100, 300 channels, I don't know, all focusing on different realms of whiskey. It's difficult to keep up. But they were speaking to an ever-growing audience out there in the world enjoying whiskey, and an ever-growing audience finding that content on YouTube. So WhiskyTube grew very, very quickly. I remember a time where my channel was growing 500 subscribers a month. And if it dropped below 400 or 500 subscribers growth in a month, I was kind of looking at it going, oh, what am I doing wrong? I've lost sight of something or whatever. It was crazy time for growth. But it was because I was such a small channel and being discovered by people at a time where all that confluence of interest was happening at the same time. It's not really the case now. New channels come along, and because they're brand new, they attract interest straight away, especially if the content is high quality, or if it's on point, or if it's something different. If it's engaging, people will be attracted to it. And that means that all the channels, the incumbent channels, the legacy channels, they all compete for watch time, for minutes, okay? And that's becoming, I think, tougher as time goes on. It's going to be tougher. The growth that we're seeing in WhiskyTube now tends to be, for legacy channels at least, much more organic and very slow and steady. And where you see these channels with huge, huge, huge subscriber numbers, but attenuated viewer and engagement numbers, what we're seeing there is a lot of the kind of ghosts, the phantoms, the legacy subscribers who have clicked that subscribe button but don't participate. They're not engaged anymore. We all suffer from that as part of the YouTube structure. I am now mindful of the fact that for Whisky to continue to be successful, and for WhiskyTube to continue to be successful, and for all the blog sites and social media sites out there, for all the retailers and all the festivals and every tendril of whiskey, for it to be successful, the community must continue to be something that's attractive. It must continue to grow. The only way that that can happen is for more people to discover what whiskey has to offer. The only way that that can happen is for whiskey to be an accessible and interesting, attractive, curious place for people to participate in. That is the reason why I think that tonight's topic might be interesting to a lot of people. We need people to understand why one bottle is £20 and why another bottle is £220. Sometimes that's justified, and sometimes it's really not. We need to arm them with the knowledge in order to be able to determine when it's justified and when it's not. We need to teach people about what whiskey is, what it means to people, how to approach it, how to relax with it, how to be comfortable with it, and how to see it as something that's fun. Above all else, something that is absolutely enjoyable and is fun. I've got a flicker on my monitor here. I'm just going to check the live feed to make it looks like it's okay on the live feed. So apologies. It happens sometimes it's really distracting. It's really annoying. But as long as it's not feeding through to the live feed, it's just this here. But there's another important question that I need to ask as well. And I really want to put this up as a wee banner here. Let's ask ourselves a question and let's reflect on our own consumption of whiskey and our relationship with whiskey, and ask the question, do we really want to encourage whiskey consumption? If we look at how we're going to grow the community, we're probably going to be speaking to people that are younger than us. Not always. We're going to be speaking to peers and family and things, and certainly people that are older than us. But often, if we're going to look for that thing to maintain and sustain itself, then the generations that come after us, they have to see whiskey as being an attractive thing, something that's appropriate for them, something that can bring fun for them. And if that's the case, we really want to look at the current trends of abstinence, of people enjoying no or low alcohol or alternatives, or the way that culture and the attitude towards consumption of alcohol is changing, especially for younger generations. Whether that's going to be a continued decline in alcohol consumption, or whether it's just kind of the ebb and flow of the generations as they come and go, we don't really know. But I've often viewed whiskey as something that exists outside of that, the way that we enjoy whiskey, the way that we drink whiskey, because so much of the alcohol consumption out there is literally just drinking. Whether it's wine, even if you're into your beer and you're selective of your beer and things like that, after the first chunk out of that glass, is there a lot of tasting going on? Are you really taking your time? Are you savouring every sip? By the time you're in your second glass of wine, your third glass of wine, are you really is the flavour speaking to you every sip, or does it just become something like this, a muscle memory drink? Whiskey for me it's always been, and the reason I'm so attracted to it is these tiny little pores, these tiny little explosive capsules of flavour with every sip. I think that, yes, it's alcohol, but the alcohol, depending on how we approach it, depending on how we encourage other people to approach it, can often be incidental. It's just my thoughts. I have to caveat everything tonight. None of it is doctrine, dogma, or facts. It's all opinions based on my experience as a whiskey evangelist, somebody who's bullied other people into enjoying whiskey over the years. I think most of them, without exception, I think, are grateful to me for that. The people closest to me, at least. But we do need to ask the question, what are we actually doing here? We are actively encouraging people to enjoy ethanol. Ethanol is a poison. It is different for every individual how they interact with that ethanol, how it affects them, whether it's negatively, positively. Some people react to it very, very well, too well. Some people react to it quite badly. Most of us, I hope, are in the majority that sits in the middle of the bell curve, where we get enjoyment out of it, And we're grown up enough and we're adult enough to realize when we're pushing it too far, and we know how to put in breaks and measures and things in order to slow down and be mindful of our consumption. But that's not me trying to be preachy or to ask anyone out there to watch what you're drinking and do. I'm sure we're all grown up, right? What I'm thinking about here is when we bring other people or encourage other people in to enjoy it, there's some responsibility on our shoulders to look to see how they interact with it, how it affects them, how it's going to be something that's a positive influence, a positive addition to their life, a better way to enjoy alcohol potentially, or whether it's maybe a little bit destructive in their personality or their makeup, their demeanor isn't best suited to have potent liquid such as whiskey. I think we always need to be a wee bit mindful of that. So when I talk about trying to grow the size of our community, our whiskey appreciation, concentric circles, if you like, I'm looking at it through the lens of someone who's probably going to be enjoying alcohol in some way anyway, but we can reach them in order to encourage them to slow down, to drink smaller amounts, and more than anything, to place enjoyment and flavour over quantity and drinking. Enjoyment for flavour and enjoyment through drinking are different things. Constantly challenging ourselves, finding new flavours, each sip being something to pause and consider over just consumption for an end effect. They are different things. And I think it's one of the most fundamental things that you can find subtle ways to convey to people to make them understand the difference between consumption and enjoyment. My pal Gary Carruthers, Gary is saying, congratulations on 7 years, Roy. I first came across the vPub in 2020 and I've watched it grow ever since. Fantastic achievement and long may it continue. We do need to mention that tonight is the 7th anniversary, Gary. Thank you very, very much. Jimmy's very, very generous dram earlier on and all of your good wishes and things. But it was Thanksgiving in 2017 that I first pressed that go live button before it was even known as the vPub. And it's been going out on Thursdays at 9:45 the same time ever since. I suspect, Gary, this is one of the few things in life that I've stuck to for this amount of time. Thank you very much for your good wishes and for your dram, your support over the years, and it's nice to have you, Gary. Cheers. Arnie is saying, Blind Challenge Sunday was the first time whiskey ever got me drunk. Part of the learning curve. Oh, yeah. And I think what you were caught up in the environment, maybe. It was not the Blind Challenge, I suspect, it got you drunk. I suspect that it was the hangout afterwards and the kind of casual whiskey sharing and things. I kind of got a wee bit of swagger a couple of years back when my kids had said that they'd never seen their dad drunk, and I thought that that was quite cool. However, that would be it would be disingenuous for me to suggest that I have never been drunk while the kids have been alive or around. That's not true, but it is quite nice that I've been able to find a way to consume alcohol in their company and in their field of view and not made them feel uneasy or queasy that the fact that I've had too much. That's a good thing. But I do get caught out as well, Arnie. There are times and there are occasions where you're caught up in the moment, in the fellowship and the fun, the friendship, the fun and the jokes, and you've taken your eye off your consumption, and then suddenly you realize. So there is no doubt that it is one of the potential hazards of consuming whiskey. And what we need to do is recognize when it happens and stop immediately, reach for water, still try and enjoy the company, see if we can recover. And if we can't recover, if we've just gone a bit too far, make our polite excuses, stay standing upright, and pick it up another day. I suspect that you did that on that Sunday night, because there was never a moment that I saw you and thought anything untoward. George P is gifted 10 Aquavitae memberships, barfly memberships. George, thank you very, very much for your super generosity. Grainer Malt James from Sweden is in. Good to see you, buddy, saying happy 7th vPub anniversary. Thank you so much, James. It's wonderful to have you as part of our community. Thank you, James. Thank you, George. My pal Jim, Whisky Novice from Northern Ireland, is saying happy Thanksgiving, those celebrating, and happy 7th Roy. Thank you, Jim. It's nice to have you in our community, and it's nice to have you here tonight. It's appreciated, buddy. Whisky and Wine Trails Tom, my pal from Arizona, has bought me a dram to say cheers, Roy. It's a lucky 7 for all of us. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for all you do too as well, Tomo. It's wonderful to have you in here, buddy. Thanks for your dram. Cheers. Going to be one of those nights. Thank you so much. Antonio D's just bought me a dram as well to say latest guidelines from health authorities. And a growing number of countries are not very sympathetic even for minor consumption. Guidelines be guidelines, absolutely. There's constant legislation going through, there's constant adjustment of guidelines, all of that's happening. We need to, despite all of that, because it's different wherever we live on the planet, it's different attitudes, different culture, different guidelines, different laws and legislation. Wherever we are, we know in ourselves, we know when we're being responsible with it. I'm not going to dwell on that too much tonight, because it's what it is, and it should be something that if you're here, and if you've been here for a long time, you know about these kind of things, and you can potentially help other people that's coming into the scene to be responsible with it. David is saying, by practicing to analyze and focus on whiskey smell and taste, now I do the same in everyday life. Food, air, everything in the world is richer for it. Water of life indeed. David, you've nailed it. I think about flavour in food. I think about flavour when I'm outdoors, when I'm walking. I think about the aromas, the smells, the atmosphere. I think about everything. I think about perfumes. I think about, you're just so, it's like whiskey has helped you supercharge your olfactory system. It's helped you supercharge your mindfulness and just appreciating what it is to be alive and to take in smell and taste and texture too. Amazing. Fantastic point. And George L has also bought me a dram as well. Thank you, George. Saying cheers to the best voice on WhiskyTube. It's not in its best shape right now, George. I'll take the compliment. Thank you very, very much, buddy. But with this continued bit of congestion, a wee bit blocked up. But that's lovely. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, George. And thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Whiskey Weekend Dram. Harrow is saying hi, barflies, and hi, Roy. Nice to have you in, Harrow, as always, my friend. Okay, so I started tonight talking about asking a whiskey geek for guidance and things like that, and it comes from, now that we've got all the difficult stuff, the awkward stuff out of the way, it comes from that idea that you're never going to ask an expert, or you should never ask an expert for guidance on a specific topic. Why? If you wanted to take up fishing, wouldn't you go to one of the best anglers that's been doing it for years? No. If you wanted to buy a car, wouldn't you go to some kind of car geek or something? No. They're going to potentially give you advice from where they are in their journey and that hobby. So they're going to go for their preference, the thing that they love best, the equipment that they enjoy, whether it's fishing or golf or classic motorbikes or cars, or it's going to be top end. They're going to struggle, I guarantee you, regardless of the field, and it's no different in whiskey. They're going to struggle to recommend things to you that they started out with whenever their journey began. It's very few people come in at the top floor, right? Most people come in lower down and build their way up. Some people through parents or friends or company or whatever do come in at a higher level, but generally speaking, for the majority of us, we start out at the lower end of things and we build upwards. I think we have to be mindful of that, but I think I'm going to start tonight by sharing the builder anecdote with you all. Many of you have heard it before. And it was only a couple of years ago it happened to me. The builder anecdote was about a builder that came here to quote for some work outside of my house. And as we were standing outside speaking, it started to spit with rain. So we opened the back door and we came inside the back door. And he's just kind of speaking to me as he's kind of just letting me know the lay of the land and things. And he looked up and he saw over my shoulder through the glass doors of this whiskey room here. And the lights were on at the time. It was all lit up. And he saw just shelves and shelves and shelves dripping with whiskey. And he stopped and he caught his breath and he was like, what is that? What is that? What is that? And I said, oh, it's my thing. It's something I do. I love it. I really love whiskey. And he said immediately, he said, oh, I love whiskey. So I opened the doors. There's no discussion over building or the work that needs done anymore. He just walks into the room and he just sees all of these bottles lit up, glowing amber, and his mouth's open. And he's just like, why have you got so many? Why have you got so many? And I start to explain to him. I start to let him understand, the accumulation and just the love of chasing flavour and how all of these bottles, despite some of them looking very similar, taste very, very different. And he was amazed. And he talked to me how much he loved whiskey. Well, quite quickly, it became apparent that he didn't know whether he liked blends or whether he liked malt whiskey or bourbons. It was just all one big amorphous whiskey bubble to him. It was just whiskey. So he didn't know that Johnny Walker, for example, was a blend. He just saw it as a brand. He didn't know that Jack Daniels was made in America and it was different from the whiskey that we make here. He didn't really know that Glenlivet and Glenfiddich were single malts. He just knew that he liked the flavour of whiskey. Through speaking to him, I worked out that his preference was smoky whiskey. And I just reached for, I don't have it here, I thought I'd brought it down, but I reached for a bottle of Lagavulin 16. The ubiquitous peaty dram, right? The thing that's available everywhere. That kind of once upon a time guardian of Islay, Lagavulin 16. And I handed it to him and I explained what it was, where it was made and the flavour profile and things. He said, oh, that sounds right up my street. And he's holding it. I said, you've never seen that? I said, I've never seen this before. I said, yeah, it's available everywhere. You can get this everywhere. And he said, how much is this? And I said, well, it's gone up in price recently. It's getting nudging on for 75, 80 pounds now, but you can usually pick it up for 60 or less. He was shocked. His reaction was palpable. It was crazy because he's suddenly holding something like it's a newborn baby. And he looked at and he said to me, is this a collectible? The idea, I had totally misjudged everything, despite the clues I had been given and despite the fact I call myself an evangelist and I've been doing this thing for years, I completely misjudged. I didn't understand one of the most critical things. £60 for a bottle of booze, which is what he saw it as, was unthinkable for him. The fact that that's a bargain compared to its retail price of 80, 85, it doesn't make any sense. To him, that kind of price is ridiculous that anybody would spend that amount of money on a bottle of whiskey. So I quickly wound it back and I picked up some other things and I showed him some other things that he might pick up in his local supermarket or whatever that might fit his flavour profile. And I backpedaled a bit. But it taught me a lesson, and it's an interaction and a story I'll never forget. And I'll lean on it forever in the future. And I think we would all do quite well, and I'm sure we're all quite mindful of the fact, and maybe some of us feel a wee bit sheepish about explaining to people the types of money that we might spend chasing these whiskey experiences today. But I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind. Barriers for beginners coming in. Donna Pask is saying, cheers to the UK. Happy Thanksgiving to the US. Thank you, Tim. It's always been wonderful to have you here. I think you've been here from almost the very beginning, my friend. And the fact that you're still in here, even on Thanksgiving, to say hello and nice words and buy us a wee dram, I'll never, ever take you for granted. Thank you, Donna Pask Whiskey. Cheers, Tim. And Falsgraph is saying, well, that's a lovely drama. I need to tell you about this in a minute. Falsgraph is saying, well, I don't think of myself having a lot of money, but in the end, I think we all have a bit of a rich man's relationship to the money we spend on whiskey. I think you're absolutely right, class. I think you're spot on. And Rico Dinert is here. Good to see you, Rico. He's saying, I stopped telling people how much I spend on whiskey. It's not making you friends. Keep it for yourself. That's right. I think what you need to do is help them understand the concept first. And then they can potentially get to a point where they can understand why you would be spending that kind of money. David in Portugal is saying in primary school, it was policy for 4th graders to get a 1st grader at school godson. Likewise, I have 2 whiskey padawans. Sponsoring can be as easy as giveaway bottles I've learned all from. That's right. So once a bottle's giving you all it's going to give you, there's still a lot in that bottle for someone else, right? It's a fantastic gesture, David. Rossford is saying, do you remember when you had a limit, what you would pay for a bottle? Absolutely, Ross, I do. Just as he's retracted that message, he's probably retyping it, and I'll probably get it to it in a second. And Anthony said, my first malts were things like Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich 38 years ago as a young soldier in the mess in Germany, and I paid tax-free pennies for them. Just missed those early days of my journey. There's a vicarious enjoyment, Anthony, isn't there, to witness that happening to someone else, whether you view them as a Padawan or somebody that you're kind of sponsoring or guiding or whatever it may be. There is enjoyment in it for us. And Chris Pollack is saying, happy 7th anniversary. I just came back from an evening out with my pals. Chris, it's nice to have you here, and thank you for the good wishes. And Ross is saying, do you remember you had a limit what you would pay? Once upon a time, I said I wouldn't pay more than $100. You and me both, Ross. Listen, buddy, it's fantastic to have you here. Another face that's been here from almost the very beginning, if not the beginning. And Arnie is saying, I know he'll hate the shout out, but please mention Max again. He really is my coach. In fact, I opened the next bottle he recommended tonight. Okay. The concept of that is crazy because they speak the same language. You know, but Arnie lives in Glasgow. German is his first language. I suspect Glaswegian is his first language now. But Max is in Austria. But that friendship there, it doesn't need to be that your neighbors, work colleagues, best friends, family members, the virtual world that we live in now, you can make connections through social media. You can make connections through here in the lounge, through all sorts of possibilities. And you can stay in communication when it's appropriate in order to help each other. This does not need to be a face-to-face thing. We've proved that over the years of the vPub, right? Peter is saying, yep, we spend a lot on whiskey, and as other people might spend on other things. Spot on. And Whiskey Novice Jim is saying, I sampled some $5 bottle whiskey last night. More average whiskey I've never had. There are incredible, affordable whiskies out there, and it's where I generally dwell, and I'm happy. But it's your knowledge and your nose where you are today, Jim, the whiskey novice, that you know where to find it. What you've done is you've taken action to help other people do the same through the Whiskey Novice channel. And for that, that makes you a guide. That makes you somebody who's helping other people access and unlock the knowledge and discernment that you have learned. So let's talk about barriers for the whiskey curious. I've got 3 of the main barriers that I see today that we all need to work to overcome. It's incumbent upon us to help people who are curious. And this is the critical thing. You might have a friend that you want to hang out with, and you might have a friend that you want to hang out and enjoy whiskey with. But if they are not interested in whiskey and there isn't a single sliver of curiosity there, leave them be. Remember the thing that's incumbent upon us when it comes to this is consumption of alcohol that we're speaking about. So it needs to be somebody that expresses curiosity or interest to you. It needs to be somebody who's curious about what you're enjoying in whiskey. It needs to be somebody that you know is probably safe in order for you to explore whiskey with them or help them explore whiskey. Whiskey curious is the best term I can think of for such a thing. If they're curious, you can start to work on these 3 main barriers with them. And this is what I see they are. What would you say the main barrier for whiskey in 2024 is? I've just shared the builder anecdote with you. It's price. We've mentioned it, we've touched upon it already. You know, that idea that we would put a limit in, a crazy high limit, £100 maybe, €100, $100. I'm not spending anything higher than that on whiskey. It's nonsense. And then we fall deeper and deeper down our own personal rabbit holes. And suddenly those hard edges that we've put in, those borders start to dissolve a little bit. And for special treats and things, or in order to attain something that we've been able to touch or sample, we push it out a little bit and we break our original rules. It's all about knowing where we stand. Before I go in to talk about price, where we are on price and how we accommodate price and guide on price today, let me tell you, I wish I'd bothered to even look this up. So you're going to know who you are as you hear this story, and I apologise that I've forgotten your name. But I welcomed a new patron about a year or so ago. And as I always do, I send a wee message just welcoming people in, and they often respond with a backstory and things of how they found the channel, how they got into whiskey. And there was a topic that we'd covered on the vPub that had resonated with them enough for them to take the action to support and become a patron because they were enjoying what we do here. And they told me that they were going to work every day, and just before they got on the train for work, they would pick up a fresh coffee, Starbucks or Costa or something like this, every single day. He realized in order for him to enjoy the whiskies that we were enjoying here on the vPub, he was going to need to up his game. He was going to need to take himself out of the supermarket aisle and look for the £20, £25 special offers, and he was going to need to find some more money. He started to make whiskey at home. He invested £10 in a metal cup to make his own coffee and stopped buying his coffee, before he got on the train in order for him to afford more whiskey. He started to buy one very decent bottle or two good bottles every month based on the £4 a day he was saving on his giant Americano or whatever it was he was picking up. When we talk about what we spend on whiskey, we have to work out that what whiskey enjoyment is bringing for us. Maybe we won't be going out for those sports event days anymore. Maybe we won't be doing the things that we're spending money on if we're just going out and hanging out and drinking for an evening and eating some meals with friends or whatever. Maybe there'll be things that whiskey can fit around our life in a very flexible way, which I hope to talk about later tonight, in order for us to save a bit of money. Whiskey is not cheap, and it's not a mechanism to save money. But there are things that we do that we sacrifice in order to enjoy our whiskey journey. It's an offset. So it's not suddenly having to find all this whiskey money. It's probably right now being used on something else. And as our life changes and our preference change and our lifestyle changes, we may become a little bit more ensconced in our homes, or we prefer quieter nights out than crazy nights out. Whatever it may be, it's a reallocation of funds rather than finding new things. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about price. Dave Shaw has bought me a dram. Thank you so much, Dave, my pal from Australia, saying 6 months an Aussie barfly. Cheers to your weekly whiskey wisdom, Roy. Loch Lomond's were a treat, but the real joy has been the lovely community and finding a fellow barfly in sweltering Perth. That's amazing to me. So even in Western Australia, we're making connections here, community, friendships. That's fantastic. Dave, that's a wonderful sentiment, and thank you for your dram, buddy. Great to hear. My pal from down south, Jason Bradford, he's said, happy 7th anniversary, Roy, and the ever fantastic vPub, and much love to the fabulous barflies. You're all so valuable. Jason, remember how valuable you are to us too, my friend. It's nice to have you here, and it's nice to have you buying me a dram. And David Hong, no comment or anything from David, so I'll just give you all a wee like and a wee love there. Thank you so much for your drams. David Hong, Tim Pass Whiskey, Jason Bradford, and Dave Shaw. And another one just dropped in from Regional Roadie in the States. Well done with 7 years of going strong. It's been a pleasure tuning in and leisurely replaying the past 4 years. If you can stomach replaying the past 4 years as well, that's extra special gratitude that goes there. Thank you, Regional Roadie, for your generosity. Cheers. Rob Smith is saying, price barrier definitely changes according to my income. For me, it was quite a bit higher last year. These are interesting times because a lot of us are not enjoying the same income that we did in recent years. A big, generous dram coming in from Graham Young saying, cheers and thank you for 7 years of beautiful friendship and an amazing international whiskey family. So many friends and lifelong relatives. Relative relationships have been made. Thank you so very much, Roy. Graham Young, you've been one of the guys here from almost the very beginning as well. Seriously, thanks to you too. Cheers, Graham. Cheers to Claudette. Cheers to everyone. And Sean is saying, whiskey isn't cheap, Aquaviti, but look at the cost of a good night out. I spent £100 recently. Better value and experience and sharing a great single malt for the same price. Sean, I think that's exactly the spirit I'm trying to get across here. But it remains a problem right now. I started to worry about how much time I was spending on the vPub in any whiskey contexts, banging on and talking about price. I'm always the one at Whiskey Club that says, how much is this? And inevitably they find out, they tell me how much it is, and I say, too dear. You know, it's just this constant grind, and it was wearing me down a little bit. But I realized that if I don't do it, who's going to do it? It is too expensive. There's no doubt that whiskey was oversold for years. Yes, absolutely, we understand, but the correction's too much, too fast, too far. We're seeing it now. Things are starting to crumble now. How can it be that Lagavulin 8 is the same price in retailer shelves right now as Lagavulin 16? How can that be? It's the industry have got themselves tied in knots right now. It's made it very, very difficult for retailers, no doubt. Retailers have to be there, especially the bricks and mortar people. They have to be there, and they have to be able to explain things clearly to the type of people I'm aiming this whole topic towards tonight, to help people come in, to make it seem like it's an enjoyable, welcoming place to be. But the prices are not only greedy, but they're all over the place, and they're random, and they were getting worse and worse for a long, long time. The correction is now here for everyone to see. We can all see how slow things are right now in whiskey sales. Now, for us as whiskey community, we're just spectating. We're going to enjoy the stuff regardless. And if there are bargains and reductions and sales and better value things that come along, we're going to take advantage, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to enjoy it if it's good quality. We're going to share it. But there's a correction. Price is as big a barrier as it's ever been today. My pal from the States, who we got to hang out with at Glasgow Whisky Festival, travelled all the way from San Francisco, has bought me a generous dram to say happy anniversary. Thanks for the great education, experience, and community. Slantia. Aaron, thank you for being part of it, my friend. Wonderful to welcome you in Glasgow recently. Cheers to you. Let me give you an example of how price is a problem right now. And it's not what you are going to expect me to say. I'm not going to hold up whiskies right now and talk about how it's terrible that these things are expensive. I'm going to talk to you about the fact that, imagine we're speaking to someone like my builder in the anecdote I just told you there, who's going to go into his whiskey supermarket aisle, and he's going to look at the things that he can afford, the things that are on offer, reduced from £35 to £25 and £38 to £28. The yellow labels, you know, the ones we see in the supermarket here. If you're elsewhere in the world, if you're in Canada or the US or wherever, maybe the bottom shelf stuff, the things that seem more affordable. Remember that guy standing there, the builder, with that bottle of Lagavulin when I told him it was £60 to £80, and just his shock at that thing. Somebody's going to go along to their supermarket and they're going to find a bottle of Old Pulteney 12, and they're going to find it on offer occasionally for £28, maybe sometimes even a wee bit less. They're going to find bottles of Glenmurray, and this is the Elgin Classic Sherry Cask edition. They're going to find this for £25 on offer occasionally. 30, 34 of that order. And they're going to find a PT expression like this Ardmore. 40% ABV. All of these three whiskies I've just shown you are all 40% ABV. And they're going to find that at a similar price as well. Those three bottles I've just shown you cover a fantastic flavour spectrum of whiskey. We've got mostly bourbon in the Old Pulteney there. There's going to be a bit of sherry mix in the makeup there, but generally speaking, it's more bourbon forward. We've got sherry cask influence there in the Glenmorangie, and we've got a nice peaty dram there in the Ardmore. That's not what's in the three glasses I've been sipping with you tonight. I upgraded because I poured the Glenelgin, I poured the Old Pulteney, and I poured the Ardmore to start tonight's vPub. And I'm sorry to say, and I'll caveat it with the way I'm feeling right now, the way I'm feeling tonight, I can't drink these. These are inexpensive malt whiskies, and the flavour profile and everything on paper suggests that this is a good place to lead people towards. If I think about the quality of the malt I was sipping when I first came in and I was first cruising the supermarket aisle to pick up my next whiskey purchase, £20 back then, £18.99 was a regular price, £21, £22, £25. The quality was much better than I am recognising in these three glasses tonight. I think that not only is price a barrier, but the value of what we're getting, those supermarket malts where the pressure is on the producer to make it as cheap as possible, the margins are razor thin for these high volume sales, that I suspect the corners have been cut to the point that it has severely damaged the product. Two of these are non-age stated. Of course, the Glenmorangie and the Ardmore are non-age stated. So maybe the whiskey's got a bit younger, we don't know. But that Old Pulteney 12 used to be a solid recommendation. And I'm suggesting to you that tonight, it's very difficult to enjoy. And I'm not a whiskey snob. If I was to arrive at someone's house and maybe all they had is some supermarket whiskey for me to enjoy, I would be very grateful and share a dram with them. But these three tonight, I'm shocked. I was going to start by just sipping these with you and hold them up and say, these are where you can guide people. You can send them to these because they can buy all three of these bottles for the same price of that Lagavulin. All three of these you can purchase for less than £80 for the collection of three. But I immediately had to backpedal before I pressed the go live button tonight. I had to upgrade because these are not the quality that's going to be needed, in my opinion, to make people understand flavour, quality over quantity, slowing down, engagement, contemplation, forgive me, but analysis. Trying to articulate what the whiskey is doing to your senses. These three whiskies have become the product of trying to meet that supermarket demand price point. Malt whiskey does not want to play at that level. It's clear. Something has to change. Something has to change. What I did is I pushed those glasses off to the side. They will not be drank tonight. I'm not giving up my liver to things that are. I'm at that stage now. I just am. I have to try and work out whether I have moved on to the point where it's not easy for me to enjoy these whiskies anymore. But maybe if I was a beginner, I could come in and enjoy them. I'm going to suggest to you no. I'll share with you how I've upgraded things in the few minutes before the vPub. And Sheila, Whiskey Central, is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 46 months. Sheila, thank you so much. And she's saying, happy 7 years, Roy. Thanks for building this community. Sheila, thank you very much for being part of it as well. I hope things are going well for you over there in France, and I hope you didn't pick up any illnesses while you were enjoying yourself in Scotland recently. Cheers, Sheila. Thanks for all your support. Cheers. So I upgraded. And I grabbed things that I felt were relatively ubiquitous or things that people could get their hands on in order to continue the theme that I'd started with these, with the first 3 supermarket drams. These are really nice drams. Sorry, that's what we need to happen. I was caught there because I've just taken a sip of this whiskey and thought, what was this really good? What did I pour there? After the Ardmore, this peated whiskey, it's night and day. The quality is night and day. It is completely different. The difference is vivid, and I put it to you that a beginner would taste the difference between the two. The theme of these first 3 is this kind of cloying, saccharine, sweet, artificial, watered down, diluted faux whiskey, phantom of what it could actually be. Because it's been dropped down in ABV, which has meant it's had to be chill filtered, and because it's made to be as cheap as possible, they rely on colour to bring that whiskey colour back to things, and that affects the flavour and texture too. Anyway, let's share how I've upgraded. My peaty dram has gone from that Ardmore Legacy at 40% to, let's call this a Kalila. Let's call it what it is. We don't know for sure, but Scarabus 10-year-old, it might not be. It could be something else, but it's certainly from Islay because they tell us that it's Islay single malt whiskey. And this is the 10-year-old version. There's a non-age statement one out there that's a wee bit less expensive than this. It's fantastic. And there's a cast strength version as well that's also non-age stated. This is the only one in the Scarabus lineup that is age stated. It's about £40, maybe 45 or something. It was quite regularly going on offer. There was lots of it about, but the quality and the texture is there. It's as pale as straw. It's very, very light whiskey. Do not let that put you or beginners off. Beginners need to understand that colour needs to be natural. If it's natural, we can enjoy the colour of the whiskey. It's part of the appreciation. As soon as they add fake colouring to things, it just becomes redundant, because it's to a specification, to a design, by adding horrible caramel colouring. My bourbon matured whiskey for the lineup tonight was Glengoyne's. It's a recent discovery for me. Loving the quality of this. It's very rare for me to be throwing praise Glengoyne's direction in recent years on the vPub because of how much their strategy has changed, but this is a peach. This is lovely, lovely, fine, balanced, textured whiskey. They're calling it their white oak because it's all from American bourbon barrels, first fill, refill bourbon, and some virgin oak. But this is really, really good quality stuff from Glengoyne. We know that it's natural colour because it's theirs, and this is 48% ABV. So it's a great bookend for that flavour spectrum. Lovely fruit, lovely light citrus, sweet citrus, lots of orchard. If you sit with this for long enough, it'll start to flirt in a wee bit in the tropical zone. It'll edge into bringing a wee bit more kind of stone fruit and peach and things. Just a really, really good whiskey. And it's because of that ABV, because they've not filtered that product, it is suddenly so much more expressive. It's not as cheap. Of course it's not. And for the sherry expression, well, of course, I went for the ubiquitous. Get it while you can, get it before it disappears. It's ubiquitous for some of us in some markets right now, but this is just, this beats everything. On value, on quality, on flavour experience. Thompson Brothers, TBBSW, just a gorgeous, balanced sherry bomb. It says blend on the label. This does not play or sip like a blend at all. Don't let it put you off. £34. Now, that Glenmurray Elgin Classic, £34 RRP, £25 on offer. You will always get it cheaper than Thompson Brothers, but encourage somebody to spend, just starve themselves from a couple more coffees in order to go to the £34 for the Thompson Brothers, and their life is lit brightly from the quality increase. The Ardmore stepping up to that Scarabus, night and day. Texture, oiliness, sweetness that does not taste like Canderel sweetener, doesn't taste like saccharin. It's got this lovely natural sweet element to it, almost like a little bit of powdered ice and sugar on there. And the smoke is just I know that so many people would dive into that and get lots of savoury and smoked meats and all of these things. For me, it's much more kind of coastal and outdoor. Wonderful. And the Glengoyne, I've already sang its praises. Bourbon cask Glengoyne. What we've got here is 3 glasses that are bookend the flavour spectrum wonderfully well to encourage people to realise that despite the fact that they're a beginner, they can clearly taste the difference. And then you blow them away by telling them that the ingredients in all of these is the grain and water. The only variables there are obviously they need yeast to ferment and the cask maturation. It's all going to be in oak. But the previous incumbent, has there been any, is going to affect the ongoing flavour. How much time it spends in that cask, so you can talk to them about these concepts in a way that they can practically understand and taste. And then you need to break the news to them on price, that based compared to their supermarket whiskies, we have doubled the price here, doubled the price. This Scarabaeus is not double the price of the Ardmore, but it's going to take you from 25, 30 pounds to 40, 45 pounds. Thompson Brothers is going to be 10 pounds more at least. But this Glengoyne, this is up in the 55 pounds realm, 50 to 55 pounds. Hopefully you can get it on offer. I'd tell you it's worth it. I would take a small measure of this Glengoyne over a full bottle of that Old Pulteney 12. Such is the nosedive in quality of that since I started drinking Old Pulteney 12. Price is part of it. Share your collection with them. Make up wee samples. Give them contrasts. Give them things that they can play with. Help break down that price barrier, but also make them understand that one bottle of whiskey will yield anywhere between 20 and 30 pours, maybe more if you're judicious with it. Consider that. How much would it cost them for 30 beers, 30 wine glasses, 30 mixed drinks, whatever it is that they're drinking now? How long would it stay fresh? Whiskey can sit on the shelf for a long, long, long time. And then you talk to them about the next barrier, which is probably, maybe Arnie can chime in here, scale. What I'm really speaking about here for a beginner is that spectre of intimidation, the lack of knowledge, that feeling that they're standing at the bottom of a mountain and they feel completely ignorant and they don't know where to go or step next. They don't know how to scale that mountain. There are so many brands, so many distilleries, so many things to learn, so many styles and profiles. As we talk about whiskey in the vPub, as we talk about whiskey in our whiskey environments, we use buzzwords and phrases and acronyms and things that betray the fact that we know a wee bit about whiskey. But that language can seem intimidating and maybe a bit along the lines of something that would exclude people that are just new in. I think we need to be mindful of that. But we also need to help people relax, because there is nothing more fun than someone who loves whiskey vicariously enjoying their whiskey again through the eyes and the experiences of somebody that's just coming in. We remember what it was like to enjoy that reaction from the glass, don't we? We remember what it was like to taste something new, to taste a new distillery, especially when it was one that we thought we could enjoy and love. So knowing that we remember that when we are sharing with somebody else, we're excited to share with other people. And so it should be. Reassure them that the knowledge is just going to come without much effort. And gaining knowledge in whiskey enjoyment is probably the most fun learning you're going to do. Don't let the scale of things put you off. Know that you've got all the time in the world. Brad Porter is saying, never here during the broadcast because I work until 6 p.m. Eastern. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone here. Cheers all. Brad Porter, it's the first time I've mentioned your name, my friend. It's nice of you to drop in, even despite the fact it's Thanksgiving for you, my friend. Thank you very much for your generous support. Thanks for picking up on the replay. Thanks for dropping in to say hello live tonight. Cheers, Brad. Nice to have you. And Arnie is saying, Aquavita, I was lucky. My first bottle I decided to buy myself was Kilkerran 12. And it pushed me over the edge into the whiskey hole with a run-up. Lucky because it was talked about during a vPub. Thanks. So you have skipped the apprenticeship tiers, Arnie, which is fine. You know, just coming straight in and enjoying something that you're probably going to have to pay close to £50 for a Kilkerran 12. But the pleasure that you're going to get out of that bottle, I put it to you that there's a high likelihood that you'll replace it once it's gone. That means it's something that you consider ended up being good value, despite something that you probably had to pay a bit more for. Kilkerran 12 is 46% ABV. The Ardmore was 40. The Glenelgan was 40. No, not Glenelgan. Elgin Classic, Glenmurray. And the Old Pulteney was all 40%. So when I went up and spent more money here, I went up in ABV as well. The Scarabaeus is 46. The Thompson Brothers is 46. And the Glengoyne is 48% ABV. So we jump up in ABV. So that helps us justify the price a little bit, but it also brings us to our third barrier of whiskey enjoyment. And this is the one that you'll hear from the industry more often than not. And there's truth in it. There is a basis in it. If someone's coming into whiskey and they like the taste of whiskey, chances are they've been enjoying it with ginger ale or lemonade or water or soda or some kind of mixer. Coke, heaven forbid. They've been enjoying whiskey and getting that whiskey flavour. When they're learning it and when they're going to be coming into enjoying whiskey with us, chances are that a wee bit of water is going to be the most that they're mixing it with. And a lot of the time, they're going to be encouraged to try to interpret and process and enjoy neat spirits. For it to be whiskey, that means the minimum is 40% ABV. And even at 40%, malt does not like to be down at that low ABV. Malt likes to sit higher, 46 and above, in order for its natural qualities to be preserved. We don't need to talk about that to someone who's new, but we do need to consider the barrier of ABV. Now, a lot of producers will tell you that we have to present our malt at 40% because otherwise it's just too hot. It's very difficult to get an audience enjoying our whiskey when it's at higher ABV. I've heard that argument, and I've watched that argument, and I've witnessed the argument, and I have been hands-on playing the game across the table, alongside the table, with people over the years, and I call nonsense. If you have whiskey that's enjoyable, if you have whiskey where all the flavors are integrated, if it's good quality, if it's delicious, if it's flavor forward, the difference between 40% and 43 and 46 is not noticeable. The only time that 40% is noticeable is when it's watery. And that's not an advantage. People are okay with 46% ABV when it's a well put together whiskey, when it's good quality. I don't accept the argument that the malt whiskey needs to be at 40 and 43% ABV for it to be mass market these days. I understand that most of the time there's not going to be a guide, there's not going to be a coach, there's not going to be somebody helping them understand and process the flavour. And maybe if the whiskey is lacking in character and quality, then it does need to be doused. Razor thin margins, corners cut, forcing malt to be where it doesn't want to be, all of these things. In my experience, I think it doesn't make much odds. Case in point, this Thompson Brothers TBBSW 6-year-old, 46% ABV. I pour that alongside a Macallan 12, blind, and ask someone tell me what they're enjoying more. This is what they're enjoying more. It's because there's more of a hook. There's more flavour in there. Once they're past the first few sips of drinking and sipping a neat whiskey, they're looking for the detail. They're looking for things that they can recognise, things that pop out, things that express. And that is flavour and quality and integrity. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes people are really drawn to not only going for a 40%, but grabbing some water and diluting it down lower. And that's fine, and you should encourage them to do so. But in my experience, it's 40% presentation for malt is much more about business. It's absolutely about business. That's okay, but don't dress it up as something else. Don't do an Ardbeg 17 on it. Ross Fudd is saying, I started in whiskey on YouTube with Ralphie, but when he stopped reviewing non-age statements, I had to look to others for reviews. I just realised I don't hear a lot about NAS these days, but it is still there. I think the new distilleries have kind of got us less focused on that. Non-age statement whiskies are still out there, but the age statements have come back, Ross, haven't they? So we've now got a situation where the old 10 and 12-year-olds used to be the entry level. Well, we've now got the non-age statement coming in underneath those, and the age stated 10 and 12s or whatever they may be have come in as well. Not all the lines all the time, but generally speaking. Non-age statement is still there, but a lot of the new distilleries, with very few exceptions, are putting out products no age stated because all of the whiskey that they're selling is much younger than the 10 to 12, what used to be considered entry-level whiskey. But it's much more delicious because it's made in a different way. It's naturally presented. It's not leaning on that age statement anymore, which is a byproduct of the years when there was lots of whiskey. Lots of it was there, and it was all mature. The industry sold age, and then they had to backpedal when all those stocks dried up. Anthony Lambert is saying, Aquavita, I host tastings for beginners now and then, and always use 46% and above and tell them why. I now have several people from these tastings that want to try cask strength at our next gathering. That's fantastic, Anthony. And when you get to that point and they try the cask strengths and you pour them a 40% whiskey, they'll notice it, like I've noticed it tonight. They will. Jim is Whiskey Novice is saying, I've noticed through administering tastings that new folk tend to mess themselves a little with anything over 46. There's a wow factor that we have to explain. It's normal to us. I get it. I understand completely. So you can manage it at 46, maybe pushing it to 48, but once it gets closer, 50s, mid-50s cask strength, it becomes harder. Jim, is that what you're saying? Are you going to say that you feel that the audience noticed the difference between 40, 43, and 46? Because in my experience, the lines are much, much more blurred, and it depends on the integrity and quality of the whiskey in the glass rather than the specs on the label. Duro the Dram is saying, I realised a big thing to explain to beginners is how to approach the sipping. Perfect, Arnie. My mum was curious. I told her to approach it like a roasting hot spoonful of soup, and she was blown away. That's absolutely true. You take less. You hold it, you move it around your palate, you coat your gums, you coat everything so that your brain is dialing in the fact that it is experiencing something different. And David in Portugal is saying, so many cask strength whiskies that go down as smooth as 40%ers. When it's good quality and well done, that's the catch. What's the one that really struck me recently? It was the new Scapa 10-year-old. That 48% Scapa really masks its ABV so ridiculously well. It is wonderfully soft. And here's a face I've not seen in a long time. Fantastic to see you, Daniel. Whiskey Throttle is in from Canada, and he's saying, Aquaviti, for us over here in Canada, the ABV is affected by our tax system for our spirits. There's no doubt that, Daniel, but I know you, fella. Does that stop you buying your cask strength? Does it stop you buying whiskey on higher ABVs? I know it doesn't. I know that it's different for everyone depending on where they are. Can I just say how nice it is to welcome you in, big guy? I hope you're keeping well. Gav's Dram is saying, if you go back, most often 10-year-olds had older whiskey. That's right. Back when the stocks were deep and they were selling whiskey based on their age, they were over-aging as well. So a 10-year-old would often have some 14 and 15-year-old whiskey in there. They don't do that these days now. It's too valuable. It's been oversold now. And class is saying if you're poor for people, the ABV is not the problem. ABV is when newbies stand before the top shelf. And Blackfen is saying when introducing people to cask strength whiskey, I tell them to treat it like biting off a quarter of a wine gum. Perfect. And Graham Fraser is saying finally made it in after an in-person Glen Scotia tasting in Stirling tonight. There must be a lot of Graham Frasers out in the world for you to get about like you do, big guy. Nice to welcome you into the vPub, buddy, as always. All right. So I've talked about the barriers. You're sitting with your beginner and you're trying to get across the ability to do things like I'm doing tonight. Now, you're maybe going to buy some sample bottles so that you've got the ability to put some samples into bottles for people. You're maybe going to decide that you've finished with this bottle of whiskey and there's not much more in it for you now, like David was talking about, or I think it was David earlier, and gift your beginner friend or whatever it may be the dregs of your bottle and things so they can go home and play with it, whatever it may be. But I think one of the concepts that you have to get across to people, and one of the things that's going to be weird or jarring for them, is this, the concept to buy for accumulation over consumption. Has anyone heard the tales about back in the day we'd talk about our parents or our grandparents? My granddad was a bells man. My dad was a black and white guy. My dad was a white and Mackay man, or whatever it is. The brands of whiskey back in the day, what they would do is they would buy their bottle of white and Mackay, they would drink it and finish it, and when it's finished, next time they're at the shop, they pick up a backup bottle, and it would be in the cupboard for when they fancied a dram later. And that was their dram. That was their whiskey. That's what they did. That's not what we do. It's not what we do. They are drinking. They have become accustomed to a flavour that they're familiar with, that they love, and they want to enjoy consistently each time they buy the thing. The people that the whiskey curious people that you're going to encourage into participating in our community, our vibe, our environment, are not those people. They are people who are open-minded. They are people who are literally whiskey curious. Curiosity is the thing that drives them. They're going to want to understand why these two things have the exact same ingredients, but they taste remarkably different. In order for that to be the case, there's a concept where they will not be finishing one bottle and then picking up another. You need to encourage them to slow down and over-accumulate, to consume less than they're buying, at least for a while, until they reach a critical mass. Why? Because through having contrasts on the shelf, different profiles, different categories of whiskey, different maturation styles, different ABVs, different everything, they're going to understand in a very, very vivid way flavour. They're going to understand why people sit about and talk about pineapple and tree bark and shoe polish and rock pools and nonsensical concepts that seem intimidating and even a wee bit pretentious to the beginners. Through them trying to articulate or understand why one thing tastes so different to another, through them trying to understand your language and them trying to find their own language, they're going to be able to comprehend these concepts that make whiskey so amazing, so good at reassuring us at how wonderful it is to be alive. Sensory pleasures. That can only be done if they have the ability to contrast at hand. Now, it may be it's a long time for that to happen. It may be they've got one bottle at home if they're lucky, and they're out and they maybe are enjoying drams with you when you can provide it, or they're at a bar or with you at a bar or whatever it may be. But it's going to get to the point that somebody's going to have to explain to beginners the concept of accumulation. When that builder stood in my room a couple of years ago and saw the sheer amount of whiskey, I remember him thinking, you must have some kind of drinking problem. And he's right, I do. I don't have the physical capacity to drink the whiskey I have, but I have the mental curiosity to want to explore. all of the whiskey I have. Volume becomes the challenge. Variety becomes the excitement. That's, I think, the difference between a whiskey drinker and a whiskey enthusiast. A whiskey drinker will drink the whiskey. They will get through it. And that might end up that they have a problem. A whiskey enthusiast ends up contemplating and over-accumulating. The fact that I keep whiskey and the fact that it doesn't disappear very, very quickly suggests that there's at least some measured health going into things. Jimmy Legg is here tonight. I think it's the first time I've picked up his name, but he's bought us a dram to say, do I have to start talking to people in order to meet someone who wants to learn about whiskey? Jimmy, unfortunately, yes. But you're already a seasoned elder in the vPub, and whether you like it or not, you have already played your role in some way or another as a guide through our community here. I think hopefully I'll end up talking about that at some point. Hey, Whiskey Wings is in. Good to see you, buddy. He's saying, bye for accumulation over consumption. I need this as a tattoo. It needs caveated, though. It needs context, doesn't it? Because it's very easy to take a phrase like that and take it out of context or misinterpret it. Hey, it's good to have you in, buddy. It's Mike, isn't it? Gordon Fraser is saying, sensory pleasures. This is getting exciting. It's not the mouth it comes out of, it's the mind it goes into, Gordon. Settle down, my friend. Good to have you. Hellswood is saying, one of our favourite flavour hooks to date is Elastoplast, Band-Aids, but it's sadly missing from Legic 10 these days. Well, I wonder that, Helen, because as you go down the road journey, I just don't, I dial out peat. I'm the worst for it. Sometimes I don't even taste the peat. I'm looking for fruit and lots of other things beyond the peat. I suspect if you poured Legic 10 to somebody from the US or North America especially, they would maybe go Band-Aids, medicinal Band-Aids. We often get told we have a drinking problem, says Ellswood, when we let slip the extent of our whiskey selection. Little and not often is the way to go. Well, if you did have a drinking problem, you wouldn't have that selection. You would have a lot of empty bottles. You would have a very full recycling bin. That's what would be the story. Gordon is saying I'm settling. Dram Mondays is saying, Aquavita, my girlfriend, bought me a bottle of Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or in 2013. Since then, I've tasted hundreds through clubs and amassed over 200 bottles in my bar. Oh, and I also married her. Here's to that, Dram Mondays. I wonder if that's the original Dram Mondays. I don't know, but it's nice to have you here. And it's a nice wee anecdote there, a nice story. A nice sentiment. You've been thanking her for that Nectar d'Or ever since, I'm sure. Hellswood is saying, did I wonder that? But even our youngest has noticed its absence. But you are guiding your youngster. He's sipping along with you, isn't he? He's in his 20s now, of course. Oliver is here in Whiskey Veritas. Good to see you, buddy. He's saying, I can see the surprise, concern, panic in people's eyes when they see my front room. It needs that moment. It needs that moment of pausing and just explaining to them, look, if I did have a drinking problem, I wouldn't have all of this whiskey here, would I? And it's not to minimize the danger that having whiskey around can pose as well. Okay. So we've done all of this thing. We've kind of got our head around these difficulties, these barriers. We now look at the people that are whiskey curious. But there's got to be something appealing, right? It's not just bright lights and pretty amber colors. It's not going to be Pokemon. We're not going to be sending them out to collect them all. But there has to be something. There has to be positives that we can help convey the pleasure that we have enjoyed in whiskey. What is it about the whiskey community? What is it about whiskey enjoyment? What is it that makes it fun? We can talk about flavour, we can talk about contrast, we can talk about those three ingredients, how they're the same right across the board, and yet the flavour is so ridiculous different to the point that you would think that sometimes it can't even be the same drink. And talk about all of these things. But what we need is some genuine positives to make people realize that whiskey could be a positive in their life. And the first thing I'm going to suggest is that I think a lot of it's to do with maturity. I think a lot of it's to do with timing. I think a lot of it's to do with how whiskey fits around your life. Is the time for you to discover whiskey the right time? For me, it was at a time where my life transitioned from youth and crazy and binge weekends and friends and going out all the time to a time where we started to enjoy our own environment, our own house, and stay home. And whiskey came to me during that period as something I could relax with of an evening. So I wasn't looking to get to Friday night so that I could do my drinking, which was a thing, unfortunately. A transition from the working week to the weekend. It was not ideal. I was starting to enjoy a dram on a Monday night and a Wednesday night, then a Sunday night. Tiny amounts, a tiny glass, lasting ages. Whiskey, the curiosity, it fits around your life. It is super flexible. If you're ready to have a dram, it's there. If you don't, you put the cork in a bottle, put it off to the side, and it's there for months, that same bottle. You're not worried about it spoiling or going off like a wine or a beer or whatever it might be. It sits there patiently waiting for the next time it suits you and your mood and moment. The cost, we've covered that price thing. It sits there. It might have cost you £30, £50, £60 more, but it's sitting there. So you can sit with that glass and think, this pleasure for the last 2 hours of me enjoying this dram has cost me £2, £2.50. I once did the exercise where I added up the value of all the whiskey on my shelf. I wouldn't do that today. And I divided it by the amount of drams that it would yield. And I worked out that I was a little under £2.50 per dram. And that was in a time that I had really expensive bottles on the shelf as well. And I reasoned with myself that that's pretty good value for the amount of pleasure that I get from that dram. If I sit on the sofa with a decent dram, it'll last me for the duration of a movie. Fantastic. The flexibility that this whiskey hobby, if you want to call it, it's a curious interest I've suggested here, but some people refer to it as a hobby, as a pursuit. It is super flexible and it fits around you. It's a wonderful social hook as well. I think before I get into this next point, you know what I'm going to suggest is a positive for anyone coming into whiskey, especially if they discover this online. Mel is saying Aquaviti, got to catch them all. Yeah, we don't want to send them down the Pokemon route, right? Hellsworth is saying one huge positive is this wonderful community. It's like, okay, let's not skip up. Let's just bring up the second point, Helen. It's like you live inside my head, right? Of course. You've hit the nail right on the head. Harrow is saying sample sharing or bottle splits. Very good. Fantastic. You need the community in order to do that. You need like-minded people. Graham Fraser is saying, I've got so many core range introductory bottles that were good value at the time, but I've moved on. I'm donating to newbies now to try. Perfect, Graham. That's what we mentioned earlier before you came in, that when you've got the value out of that bottle, you can pass it on. Falscraft is saying, for me, it was exactly the taste difference and experience with different whiskies. It was tasting that showed the range of tastes that originally hooked me. It was the contrast, wasn't it, class? Helen is saying, fighting ourselves to death when we did that. Necessary for insurance purposes, but scary the amount spent over the years. If you had a different hobby, travel, boats, classic cars, racing cars, some high-end sports equipment, whatever it may be, we all face the spectre of what the thing is costing us. We all end up with a cookie trail of equipment and things that we don't need or use anymore, or where we've lost money on things. Whiskey with a canny mind is less risky in a lot of respects. Whiskey novice Jim is saying, if anyone's like me, you could live in the nose of most whiskies. We'll drink eventually, but the nose for me is generally the star. How often do you just pick up a beer or even a glass of water and muscle memory, just you go, yeah, you catch yourself nosing it? Well, it was whiskey that did that. It's whiskey that taught you the pleasure, the sensory pleasure, and the anticipation, just nosing the thing before you taste it. You're spot on. Peter Lee saying, Roy, just home and poured. I've been Rinnis from Alistair McPhail. You built a community that shares the same passion. Amy, Denise and I are all humbled that you shared lunch with us and having a relaxed chat. Peter, I know I don't get to do it very often, buddy. It's hard to get out, as we explained and discussed at the time. But there was a wee moment of window opportunity there. And you deserve it, fella, for the things that you've brought and the generosity and the time that you've given our community over recent years. You, Denise, and Amy, you deserve it. Thank you all so much. Amy's wee glass is pride of place here. Fantastic. Thank you, Peter Lee, for your dram as well. Thanks for everything you do. Cheers to the Lees. Scroll back up, jumped again, not too far. And Arnie's saying it's a perfect storm for geekery and emotions, history, technology, biology, legacy, and on top of that, a vehicle for stories, nostalgia, and associations, smelling and tasting memories. It sounds very romantic, Arnie, doesn't it? But you're just in the door, and already you've been stripped of that kind of armor that you had of cynicism. You're in. You've bought the T-shirt. You understand what it has to offer. Let me tell you, 2025 will bring me into whiskey for 2 decades, 20 years. And I'm still full of the romanticism of it, every bit as much as I ever was. In fact, for me, you could argue as the years tick on, it just continues to yield new wonder. It's incredible. And George Ellis saying, thanks to the American Bottled and Bond Act, I can purchase 4-year-old, 50-year-old ABV whiskey for $20. No colour, no chill filtering. It's not about scale, but simple greed. Greed beyond that point. George, you're spot on. The Bottled and Bond Act is fantastic. $20, that does seem remarkably cheap, but if there's good flavour there, if it's something you can sip, slow, high quality, contemplative, liquid, fantastic. Great. I have very few Bottled and Bond. I've got, I think, an Evan Williams. I've certainly got Mellowcorn. I've got a few Bottled and Bonds there, but 50% ABV, right, for them all. Fantastic, George. And Ross is saying, maybe we're all recovering expensive hobbyists, scuba diving, flying, and boats. For me, it was golf. And before that, it was classic cars. Ridiculously expensive pursuits. Depending on how deep you dive in, of course. David is saying, discussing about whiskey is mostly about objectively aquavitae, overlapping subjective truths. Isn't that about spirituality amongst religious? How is that not healthy these days? And you not only can you do that and push those concepts, but we find through the spirit of community safe spaces to do that. People that understand us, that it's not pretentious, it's not stupid, it's not invented, it's not made up, but it's very, very visceral and real. That is the value of a global community. That is what whiskey, because we find each other. The whiskey finds us. We want to share it. We want to get the word out there. We want to understand what it's doing to us. So we seek the word. So the people that are willing to put the word out there, we want to consume. And it just becomes this huge symbiosis, beating, sentient thing, this sense of community. And because my theory, it's my personal theory, because whiskey has pre-selected curious minds, in order for you to love this thing, you need to have an open, curious mind. The chances are you're going to come into that community with an open, curious mind. So the chances are you're going to be a gracious, kind person, a nice person, the type of people that we enjoy hanging out with. We're going to see each other as people before all the other things that can potentially divide us. That sounds ridiculously romantic. You tell me, if you've been to an event like Glasgow Whisky Festival weekend was 2 weeks ago, that you didn't feel that plays out in front of your eyes. Mostly good people, aquavitae reminds, Jimmy Legg has reminded me, I'm still here and so is Frank. Jimmy Legg and Frank and Doc and all the other channel elders. You're good people. Anthony Lambert is saying, I drink my whiskey so slowly that when I compare what I paid for a bottle and what it would cost me now 8 to 10 years later, sometimes Old Springbank, Talisker, 18, etc. Anthony, you've been around long enough. You've accumulated. You bought for accumulation over drinking and finishing, right? So that it's almost like you're driving home my point. Graham Fraser is saying the North Berwick Whisky Club is on tour to Islay next week for our annual pilgrimage. The excitement never fades after 30 years. And I'm going to suggest to you that you, Dave, Neil, Ewan, the North Berwick Whisky Club, wonderful guys that you are, there's a sense that you are a bit of a guide there. You're quite a bit ahead of the rest of them when it comes to years' experience in the game and your accumulation over the years, not only of whiskey, but of knowledge and experiences and things that you're willing to share, not only with your pals in North Berwick Whisky Club, but with us here in the community. You're an elder, you're a leader, you're a guide. We appreciate you, Graham. We really do. Jimmy Legacy, and I don't think I bought to accumulate aquavitae. I just bought faster than I drink. Whether you meant it or not, that's what happened. And look at this, Danny Hebbington in buying me a very, very appropriate, but far too generous, big dram to celebrate 7 years. Danny's saying, 7 years is a good old stint, my friend. And here's to many, many more. You're the ticking heart of this community, and I couldn't think of a better lad to glue us all together. Cheers, Roy. You're a great soul. I've not been drinking too much tonight, but I find that difficult to read, Danny. Thank you. We've not met. We shall meet, and we need to meet soon, my friend. That's super generous of you. Thank you so, so much. That means a hell of a lot. Cheers, Danny. Thank you, buddy. Okay. Danny is proving the point there. A global community of good people. That's the critical part there. It's not just the amount of people. It's not the number of people. It's not the swell, the scale, the size. It's the quality of the people in our community. And we become very precious about that. So we want to preserve that warmth, that welcoming, inclusivity, that guiding hand, that welcoming people in, helping people understand where they are, where they've come from, and letting them, through our example, pick up that this is a good, welcoming community. And if disruptors want to come in, fine, let them come in. But hopefully they realize that they don't need to disrupt. Things are pretty good. And the ones that it doesn't suit their vibe, they'll move on. We like it being positive, inclusive, and fun. And with that has got to be one of the biggest positives to attract anybody in. It might seem pretentious as I open a bottle and I'm nosing it, and it might seem really quite arrogant for somebody to be scoring whiskey, a subjective concept like that, to give it a score, to declare whether it's of quality or not. It's really quite pretentious, isn't it? But we're all just finding ways to articulate our pleasure. We're all finding language to communicate our disgust and our upset when things are silly or seem to be silly. We're all just finding safe spaces to express ourselves. And if that seems a wee bit pretentious at times, I think it's okay. It needs somebody to invest a wee bit longer to go over that potential bump of perceived pretentious arrogance, pompousness, stuffiness, fuddy-duddy, whatever it comes across as. If they stay for long enough and they invest time, they will see, especially if you've suggested the case, it's fun. It's intended to be fun. It's meant to be fun. It should always be first and foremost fun. The reason we love whiskey, the reason we love its community, the reason we love how flexible it is and how it fits around our life is because when everything else is washed away, it's fun. This is fun. Tiny amounts of alcohol ridiculous spectrum of flavours, the analysis of it all, the sharing of it all, the potential of it all. It's exciting and it is fun. If you can convey that to someone who's whiskey curious, they're in. They're in. And a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, however long it is, you'll meet them again. You'll raise a glass and they will thank you for the time and the whiskey that you invested in them when they were starting out. They will tell you that they are having fun and they're grateful. Very generous dram from my pal from the Netherlands. Oh, it's so good to see you in, Daisy. It's always good to have you here. You're saying, evening, Roy and Barflies. Happy 7-year vPub anniversary. I'm very grateful for this community you created and giving us a home on Thursdays. Every one of your dear friends, near and far away. Daisy, that's a wonderful sentiment. Stop it. I'm not going to get... This is just a regular vPub. I've not been drinking a lot tonight. It's not the time to get emotional. I do want to celebrate, honestly speaking, the 7 years thing. I don't do it in the vPub. We don't have big parties and things. Oh, it's another year. But it's nice to mention it. It's nice to note it. It's nice to recognize it. And it's nice to take steps to preserve it. With sentiment like that, Daisy, and honestly, hats off to you. It doesn't matter whether it's in Germany. It doesn't matter whether it's in Scotland. If there's an event around where the barflies are involved and we're gathering, you make the effort, Daisy, and you're always here. And you bring a lot of smiles, a lot of comfort, and a lot of happiness, a lot of fun to everything that we do. Daisy, thank you so much. Cheers. Falscraft is saying, Daisy, you're one of the best folks to say this. Thanks for doing so. Jimmy Legacy saying, everyone loves you, Daisy. They really do. She's fantastic. She's just great spirit to have around. As most of you are. I want to finish off tonight with probably the most important thing, and I consider every one of you to be a potential coach in whiskey. It's not something that's incumbent upon you. You do not need to go forward with your whiskey enjoyment and find an apprentice, a padawan, someone to sponsor, someone to kind of indoctrinate into alcohol and whiskey and everything. No. But if someone approaches you and someone is whiskey curious and they're going to find their way anyway, I can think of no one better than one of our beautiful whiskey folk, one of our dedicated barflies, one of us, to reach a guiding hand out to them and say, whiskey is a good place to be. To show them the benefits, to show them how to do it responsibly in a measured way, and to lead them all the way up that path, to show them just how much fun it can be, because everyone deserves a coach. Everyone deserves somebody to say, especially in 2024. There wasn't WhiskyTube when I started in 2005. I used books and I used the Malt Maniacs and I used Whiskey Forum and places like that. But we have different things, different dynamics today. There are coaches available to you, whether you're in a busy city, there will be a whiskey club near you. And if there isn't, there'll be one bursting to happen. Maybe you can be the catalyst. If you're in a remote space, as long as you've got a data connection, there are people and friendships ready for you. You can take the role of a coach, or you can take the role of somebody who is needing a coach. You will find them. It is incredible what whiskey can offer you. It is difficult to overstate the possibilities and responsible enjoyment of whiskey and all its accoutrements, all its beautiful people that comes to its side. I sound like a romantic. I sound like a maniac. I sound like somebody who is drinking far too much of the Kool-Aid. But you, the people that are here, know It's not madness. It's here for the people who are measured, who are canny, who are serious, and serious about having fun. Off to bed, says Doodle the Dram. Buying me a dram on the way. Fun it certainly is. Maria agreed tonight with me taking over another shelf. She says she likes seeing me having fun with a hobby outside of work for the first time in years. Here's to you, Arnie, and here's to Maria. Cheers to you both. Here's to that extra shelf. Peter Lee saying, didn't realise it's your 7-year anniversary. Denise and I would love to wish you all the best health and dive deeper into whiskey for us all. Another dram. Thank you very much, Peter Lee. Wonderful to have you here and your support. Thank you for your drams, buddy. Thank you for your support. Jonathan Mace is here too. Jonathan, so good to see you at Glasgow, obviously, recently. A wonderful book that you were having everyone sign. Happy. Drams giving. I like that sentiment too. To Arnie, to Daisy, to Peter Lee, and to my pal Jonathan. Cheers to you all. I don't know if I've got my point across tonight. Whiskey is plateauing. The growth of whiskey post-craziness of the pandemic, post-COVID, it's struggling a little bit. Whiskey itself has grown up a little too much. It's outgrown its community right now. I don't think the community needs to grow to a point to catch up with that. I think the correction needs to happen, and whiskey needs to learn how to cut its cloth a bit better in the future. Whiskey needs to find balance, and it's down to whiskey, as we're discovering as events unfold, for whiskey to make the changes. We'll still be here, but we've made it clear that we're not willing to participate in the crazy prices and everything like that. The things that detract from the community, the things that detract from the fun and the potential that whiskey offers. We don't like greed, and we won't suffer it. We certainly won't suffer it for very long. You know, fool me once and all of that kind of thing. I think there are corrections ahead, but we need to remember as a community, we've never lived through these times before. The choice that we have today has never been this varied. And if whiskey is struggling a little bit and needs to come back to us a little, that's good for us as a community. This is a good time to encourage other people to come in and participate in this. But it needs a canny hand, it needs guidance, it needs wisdom, and it needs our experience and our willingness to share and hold an open hand out to those people who are starting out in whiskey today. I really hope that this session hasn't been too kind of, I don't know, self-indulgent, introspective, heavy, or crazy tonight. I think we just need to be mindful of what we have and the fact that it might not be here forever. It's guaranteed that it's not going to be here forever. But wouldn't it be nice if we could keep it going for as long as possible? Jimmy Legg has bought me a generous dram. Thank you, buddy. He's saying, because of you, the past 7 years have been the best of my life. No small feat. The first 50 years were pretty good. Thanks, Roy. You and whiskey did this. Thank you, Jimmy Legg. Thank you, my big pal from Canada, who's been over here twice now, despite the fact that he said he would never travel and he would never make it. Well, I don't doubt for a second, buddy, that you'll be back here again. Peter Lee saying, you're not that wrong there, big man. My circle of friends has increased dramatically since joining Aquavitae Barflies, giving me and you the best life. And that's what we need to kind of focus on. Has to be, when I open tonight, asking you the question, should we be encouraging whiskey consumption? Should we be encouraging alcohol consumption? Yes, but we need to be mindful, we need to be careful, and we need to apply wisdom. We know this. All the knowledge is here. All the wisdom is here. The positivity, the wonderful vibes, the welcoming nature is here. We've recognized that. Now we just help it endure. Right up until we do a quiz at the end and destroy the whole thing, of course. I'm going to pour something. These whiskies have been good. The first whiskies I've poured have not been very good. But I need to pour something that's a bit of a treat. Here we go. Just because it's within reach, I haven't had this in a wee while. It's a Thompson Brothers. I deserve this. This is a 30-year-old Thompson Brothers, North British. It's obviously a single grain. I hope it focuses there for you to see that. 311 bottles of this 30-year-old. I think I picked this up at Dornoch. I think I picked it up at the distillery. Going from memory now, I'm not sure, but I've enjoyed a few drams of this. But I'm going to consider, as this rolls into the glass here, that this distillate was made 30 years ago. So we're going back to probably, what would we be? 1992, I think this is, maybe. No, actually, no, it's older than that. My goodness, it tells me the vintage on here. This is actually 1988. So it's been on the shelf for a wee while. 1988, 30 years old. What was I doing? Well, 1988 is the year I became of age to drink alcohol in the UK. That's when this whiskey was made. My goodness. Nothing of note had happened to me by 18 years old, right? Some things maybe. And it's been waiting. This liquid has been waiting all that time for it to roll into my glass tonight and raise it to say, thank you to all of you for a wonderful 7 years. Thank you to Whisky for a wonderful close on 20 years. Who'd have thought? Slanchava, cheers. Ryan Sutherland is celebrating being -3 years old, 1991. Wow. I deserve the treat tonight. That's absolutely delicious dram. It took me a while to get my head around single grain and to enjoy those really, really sweet flavors. This is coming across a little bit like sweet tablet tonight. Tablet is a crumbly Scottish, very, very heavily sugared, slightly caramelized treat. It's got a texture like nothing else you've ever experienced. Scottish tablet, if you get good quality Scottish tablet when you visit here, you only need a tiny square, not much bigger than a sugar cube, right? It's so sweet, so intense, but there's a lot of kind of tablet, lovely light brown sugar. Sweet coconut fondant tablet macaroon. And sweet clementine, sweet citrus. Yeah, very sweet, overripe citrus. Easy peelers. Cheers, it's fantastic. What a pleasure. Jeffrey Bangers says, Aquaviti, I have a good job, a beautiful family, great friends, but there is no doubt that this vPub on Thursdays, or whenever I pick it up on replay, is a special corner of my life. The fact that I could do this thing and that I found people on the planet who care, that they actually enjoy it. It's difficult for me to convey, to explain to people who don't understand this thing, what it is and why it's even interesting or fun to anyone. I appreciate it. I appreciate it up until the point that I abuse you in the quiz at the end. Listen, the quiz at the end this week is going to be a mixed bag. It's going to be a wee bit self-indulgent, a wee bit like we've touched on some self-indulgent themes tonight. I hope that's okay. But it's 7 years of the vPub. I haven't laboured it throughout tonight, I hope. Thank you for helping me mark it and recognise it in your typically generous way. But the quiz at the end is going to be, some questions will be a wee bit self-indulgent. That said, the folk, especially folk that's been around here a wee while, will find it easy, a walk in the park. There will still be a few banana skins. There will still be an asshat question or two. It should always be an achievement if you make a 10 out of 10 at the quiz at the end. Thanks to everyone. If you're going to disappear just now, that's okay. Come back and try the quiz on the replay or something like that. But those of you that are willing to hang out with me for some fun and a bit of a challenge before we hang up our Glencairns for the night, I welcome you to stay. And remember, it's always multiple choice. And you're only playing against yourself. Good luck, everyone. Have I got this teed up and ready? Did I remember to do this? I did. Looks like the right one. Okay, 10 questions, multiple choice. Lean on the crowd if you have to. There are lots of coaches and willing evangelists and guides in the vPub right now, and you can lean on them. Be mindful and wary of banana skins, because they are just as like to slip up on those banana skins as anyone else. Good luck, everyone. Question 1. Which of these distilleries did Roy visit? Which of these did I visit before my Glengoyne epiphany back in 2005? So I've shared the story of Glengoyne with everyone multiple times by now. But before Glengoyne in 2005, before that journey kicked off, I did visit where? A, Bushmills in Northern Ireland, B, Middleton in Ireland, or C, Talisker on Skye. Which of those distilleries did I visit before that day at Glengoyne when everything changed? Totally leaning on the barflies, says Rob Smith. And I hope, Rob, you do okay on your own, under your own steam. Do you not normally? Sweet single grain usually means a corn grain. Well, North British was one of the distilleries that was set up to handle corn back in the 80s, though I'm not so sure. I don't know. I tend to find wheat-based single grains can be very sweet too, especially if it's left in a bourbon cask like most of them are for all of its puff. Lachlan Mackenzie's in saying CGWTF, going with the flow. Is that? Almost everyone's saying C. You've been around to hear me telling the stories. Jimmy Legg is saying, has Roy been to Ireland since the incident? Absolutely, I have. I have not toured an Irish distillery since the incident, Jimmy. But before I visited Glengoyne in 2005, in the late 90s, I visited Middleton. And in the mid-90s, I visited Bushmills. The reason that the Bushmills correct arrow is greyed out is that it depends on your definition of visiting a distillery. Middleton and Talisker, I took a tour of both of those. Bushmills, I only just visited the place. So I didn't actually take a tour of the facility back in the mid-90s. But there you go. I've visited all of those. So everybody's getting a freebie tonight. It's up to you. If you answered A and you don't consider that a true visit, then maybe not. But I've visited all of those before the epiphany happened. The incident, as Jimmy mentions, in 2005 at Glengoyne. For those of you who have not heard the story, remind me and I'll tell you all about it. It's written on the aquaviti.com website. It's called The Luca Story. Question 2, which of these is available today, but was not available to me when I first found whiskey? Which of them are available today, but was not available when I first encountered the incident, as it's going to be known from here on in? A, Glengoyne's Legacy, B, Glengoyne's 21-year-old, or C, Glengoyne's Teapot Dram. Which of those was not available back in 2005, but it is available today? Graham Fraser, that comment was pointed directly at you. He's adamant. You can't say you visited a distillery without a tour. That is why the arrow, or the tick, not an arrow, it was a tick mark, was greyed out, buddy. But I think you answered C anyway. Daisy is suggesting A. Lassie Oatsman is here saying A as well. Good to see you, Lassie. Always worry about how I'm pronouncing your name, my friend. Hellswood is saying, we're good, thanks. Looking forward to a weekend dram. Speaking to Rod Graham. Rod Graham's in for the quiz at the end. Good to see you, Roddy. How are you keeping, my friend? How are you keeping? A wee bit self-indulgent in some of these questions tonight, Roddy, but hopefully you can piece together things like this. Donna Andrews, that looks like a new name. Welcome in, Donna. It's good to have you here. You think it's Glengoyne's Legacy as well. I can tell you that available to me in 2005 and available today was Glengoyne's 21-year-old, whereas the Legacy and the Teapot Dram were both not yet released. Teapot Dram, I think, came along in 2010. And the first Legacy, I think, was 2015, 2016. So yeah, being very generous. If you've answered the A or C, you're in good shape. Question 3. Where would you find this phrase? Where would you find these words? And I know that it is the clear water of the spring that will make the whisky just as fine as new milk. Where would you find those words written? A, in, sorry for the spelling mistake, Alfred Bernard's original book. B, in a William Black short story. Or C, on a whisky bottle. A, in Alfred Bernard's original 19th century book, The Distilleries of the, what is it, the United Kingdom, or Distilleries of Great Britain and Ireland, is it? Or B, in a William Black short story, or C, on a whisky bottle. I remember back when the Teapot Dram was £50, says Lowlander. I never bought it at £50. I never bought batch 1. I never picked it up. I think I came to the Teapot Dram from batch 2 onwards. But yeah, it was a lot cheaper. I think 70 or 80, if my memory serves right. Lots of you enjoying 2 out of 2 so far. Question 3, let's see how you got on with this. Where are these words? And I know that it is the clear water of the spring that will make the whisky just as fine as new milk. Bear with me one moment. Look after yourselves. How can you lose a bottle of whiskey? Well, in the vPub, it's easy to lose a bottle of whiskey because there's just so much of it about. But yeah, I picked out this bottle specifically for this question and other things earlier, but it's not here. So that's giving it away for you. You'll find those words on a whiskey bottle. You'll also find it in a William Black short story. This is part of the phrase that's printed on the front of every single bottle of Lagavulin 16, and it's the strange horse of Loch Sunaval. It's a William Black short story. Seek it out. There's an electronic version available online. Read it. It is marvelous to behold. It's just fabulous. It's really, really good. It's in the shape of a letter. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Seek it out. The Strange Horse of Loch Sunaval. It's the story of a Kelpie and a man who's drinking a wee bit too much, let's say, the protagonist. It's just a great story. Fantastic stuff. You'll find it on the front of a Lagavulin bottle and in a William Black short story. So I'm being generous to you so far as we go into question 4. Which of these distilleries is Diageo's most northern? Which of these distilleries is the furthest north? A, Chineric. B, Brora. C, Clynelish. Which of those 3 distilleries is the furthest north? George Ellis saying, if this channel was about toy trains, I'd still enjoy the community. I take my whiskey seriously, but I'm here for the community. Thanks, Roy, for bringing us together. George, my pal over in Arizona, thank you for being part of this. It's great. It's wonderful to have you and your Arizona pals here. Cheers. I'm glad that you all enjoy it so much, because the more that we enjoy it, the more it's likely to endure. Brora Clynelish, you devil, says Jimmy Legg. Question 4, am I being a devil? See, we have to remember that it's not just about knowledge, it's about previous things that have happened very recently in the vPub, recycling questions that have been used very, very recently in the vPub. And Peter Lee is saying, Aquavita, they're only separated by a road. Spot on. Chineric is a bit further south. It's much closer to Alness. Brora and Clynelish it's obviously very close to Brora. and the two are right next to each other, separated by a road. But the distillery located on the north side of that road is Brora. So it's going to start to get crunchy from here on in. Most of you should be on 2 or 3 out of 3, doing quite well so far. Pass mark is usually 5 as we go into the picture question. Here we're looking at a still room between two fairly wide-bottomed but slender-necked stills, and we're looking at a spirit safe here. But that's all the clues that we have in this scene. And I'm going to ask you, where are we? Where are we? Are we A, we're on an island, B, we're on an industrial estate, or C, we're in a distillery that's inside another distillery? Where are we in this scene? We're on an island, on an industrial estate, or in a distillery inside a distillery. There potentially should be, and I sat a banana skin here. This is quite tricky as I reflect now. Sugar Kitty's saying, this looks like where I have been. That would be amazing if that's the truth. John's here, the Ginger Genius. Good to see you, buddy. Stephen Gibson, aka Springer Ginger. 2 gingers in. Ginger Genius and Stephen Gibson, the Springer Ginger. Fantastic. Donna Andrews is saying A. David Brave is in, saying A as Jeffrey Bangers. A. Daisy saying A along with Whiskey Novice. Keith Duncan, good to see you, Keith. Dan DVDW saying A. Absolutely everybody saying A. And Lachlan admitting A. Going with the flow. Absolutely. We are on an island. Well done, everyone. This is Lochranza. This is Isle of Arran. Lochranza. Looking straight between the two stills as the line arms reach off to the vertical condensers there. And you can see the logo up in the background. This is Lochranza. Well done. We are on the north of the Isle of Arran. Question 6. The first Aquavitae Live was Thanksgiving back in 2017. But when was it first called a vPub? When did we change it from just calling it Aquavitae Live? Excuse me. I'm nervous. I let one of those burps out without hitting the mute button. When did we first change it from Aquavitae Live to vPub? Was it A, about a week later, B, about a year later, or C, about a week into lockdown in 2020? When did we change the Aquavitae Live to calling it a vPub? Gordon Fraser saying it doesn't mute for Dramface, though. I've learned that, Gordon. You know, you have to be careful at the button. If you're not careful, you'll double press it or it'll bounce and you'll mute and then immediately unmute again. You'll let out a burp and everybody gets a shot of it. Thank you all for your generosity tonight. One of the reasons I don't kind of make a big deal out of parties and celebrating these anniversaries is because it tends to encourage that behavior because you're also bloody generous. It's very, very great. I'm very grateful. Ben is saying, I'm glad I missed this quiz. Not quite, buddy. You can pick it up on the replay. This one is splitting the crowd a wee bit. Gav's Drams is going with the right answer, which is D. I can tell you that Aquavitae Live became known as the vPub about a year later. It kicked off in November 2017, but January 2019, just a month or so over a year, we started to refer to it as the vPub, the virtual pub, the place to hang out and enjoy whiskey together. So if you answered B, give yourself a point. It's going to start to thin out now. It's going to get trickier. Let's take it away from the self-indulgent questions and ask you, around the turn of the millennium, Laphroaig became the #1 Islay single malt. Sales by volume. Not necessarily by value, but sales by volume. But which did it supplant at that time? Which was #1? Until Laphroaig took the crown. Laphroaig is still the #1 best-selling Islay today, by the way. Was it A, Ardbeg, B, Lagavulin, or C, Bamor? Was it A, one of its Kildalton neighbours are Beg, B, the other Kildalton neighbour, Lagavulin, or C, from the island's capital, I suppose the main town on the island, Bamor. Was it Bamor? What was the best seller until Lefroy came along and took that crown? Wow. Wow. There should be a banana skin here. Everyone is following everyone to slip on the same banana skin. And Tony Nelson has come in and said, A for our beg. Very few are saying the right answer. Oh, no, it's not true. Too slow. Craig Willis, Dave the Brave, Keith Duncan, Dacey. Right up until stock became a problem. It was launched in 1988 as part of the classic malts, quickly became very, very popular as a single malt to the point that it overtook all the other single malts for sale at the time. And it became such an issue that the owners then, DCL, gave more and more and more of its allocation away from blending to providing product for the single malt. It became such a problem that they had to find ways to increase the capacity. And they did that not by extending fermentation room or anything. They just added extra shifts and they managed to increase the amount of mashes per week, but it took a while to catch up. And it went on allocation at times, and I'm talking about Lagavulin. But throughout the late 80s and the 1990s, the best-selling Islay single malt, more often than not, year after year, was Lagavulin until Lefroy took that crown around the turn of the millennium. So if you answered B is the correct answer. Bamor and Lefroy are exchanging blows today. Lagavulin is still in the top 5, but quite a way behind. Question 8. Which is the greatest number? I'm looking for the biggest number, bit self-indulgent here, if I'm honest. A, the number of malt distilleries across the British Isles, malt whiskey distilleries, that is, operating in the British Isles in 2024 today. B, the number of Aquavitae Live vPubs. Or C, batches of Aberlour Abuna, Springbank 12 cask strength, and Glengoyne Teapot Dram all combined. Which is the greatest number? Number of malt distilleries, number of live vPubs, or the number of Aberlour Abuna, Glengoyne Teapot Dram, and Springbank 12 cask strength all combined? That is why there's an ass hat in this question here. How is this question number 8? Says Kyle Taylor. I'm sorry. Listen, this is the last in November. Okay, all the December vPub quizzes at the end will tend to be lighter and more fun, sliding into that kind of party atmosphere as we lead up to the Christmas vPub, end of the year vPub, just before Christmas. So things will get a bit lighter and easier on you. But if anybody gets a 10 out of 10 tonight, there's a wee bit of challenge in it. And I couldn't not have some kind of questions at the quiz at the end that didn't recognize the fact that it's 7 years of the vPub tonight, right? So there we have it. Rod Graham is saying, hello, Roy, you are a jobby. Thanks, Roddy. Thank you, buddy. I am a wee bit of a jobby from time to time. But think about this. If I say that this is a self-indulgent question, if I'm talking about it being a question specifically in there, because it's the 7th year of the vPub, of course, the answer can only be that the greatest number is more than 250 distilleries in the British Isles, more than the combined 100 and I can't remember what number I got to, 150 over the batches of Aberlour. Springbank 12 cask strength, I think, is at 25 or 26, about 80 for Aberlour Abuna, about 10 for Teapot Dram, adding it all together. But Aquavitae Live vPubs, not including the Oswas, not including the the ones I've done that are just kind of ad hoc things live from Texas or whatever, but genuine scheduled vPubs or the extended Sunday night vPubs that we did back in the times of lockdown, all of those together number currently in the order of about 280. Self-indulgent, is there anyone on 8 out of 8? Yes, Graham Young is on an 8 out of 8. James Costigan, that looks like a new name, James. You're doing very, very well on a 7. It's nice to welcome you in. Is that the first time I have done so? Dave the Brave and Daisy Vleeland are both on 8. Fantastic. Whiskey Total is celebrating. That looks good. And Sticks191 is saying, shoot me now. You can stay around and be shot or shoot yourself, or you can do your very, very best. vPub at the end isn't, quiz at the end isn't normally quite like this. It's the 7th anniversary tonight. Okay, second from last. Wee banana skin here, be mindful of it. Which of these statements are true about Loch Lomond Distillery? I'm going to give you 3 statements about Loch Lomond Distillery in the Southern Highlands, and I want you to tell me which is true. A, in their cooperage, they can rejuvenate up to 60,000 casks per year. B, they have peated, unpeated, and triple distilled core 12-year-olds. Or C, they can make up to 25 million litres per year. Which of those statements is true about Loch Lomond? Peter Lee saying, I loved the vPub during lockdown when it was twice a week, aquavitae. I remember how difficult it was to do, though, Peter. I remember feeling really quite, I don't know, I enjoyed it too. There were things about lockdown that I'm a wee bit nostalgic about. I hope you can forgive me for that, but there was something nice about it too. Which of these statements are true about Loch Lomond? In their cooperage, they can rejuvenate up to 60,000 casks every year. They have peated, unpeated, and triple distilled core range 12-year-olds. Or they can make up to 25 million litres per annum. Ian Williamson saying, no clue, I'll wait. He's holding. No, it's A, I've been in the cooperage. There's like 4 guys. Jimmy, there are 9 guys. P-Head is saying, guessing the word can, and the fact is not all about malt only. P-Head, Frank, you're onto something. You're saying C, they can make up to 25 million litres per year. I have not specified malt whiskey. Remember, Loch Lomond is a grain and a malt distillery up there. So Frank is absolutely right, but you are also correct if you said A. They do have 3 12-year-old whiskies in their core range. Of course they do. One of them is peated Inchmoan. One is a fruity straight neck pot still Inchmurren. And the other one is the original. None of them are triple distilled. So I was looking for either A. I was being quite generous here that they can, for those 9 guys that work in that cooperage there, they can rejuvenate up to 60,000 casks per year. Just because you've taken the tour or been able to see that they take the time over showing you how one goes through, they're knocking those things out very, very fast. 25 million litres per annum is their potential capacity. It's probably less than 20. Malt, I think, is maybe about 2.5, 3 million litres, I'm not sure, and about 16 million litres of grain. I'm not sure, but something of that order. But they can produce up to 25 million. So if you answered A or C, you're in as we go into the asshat at the end. Jimmy Legacy saying, I don't believe A is correct. Well, I know, I hear you. It did sound rather fantastic to me, but I do use sources for these types of things. And I use all the malt whiskey yearbooks, as well as other books, Dave Brim books, lots of Charlie McLean books, things like that. And it is, but that fact is one I picked up in an older malt whiskey yearbook. All right, we move into the asshat at the end. Who's on a 9 out of 9? Graham Fraser. I was there with Roy last year. Fantastic, Graham. 60,000 casks per annum. Amazing. Daisy is on a 9 out of 9. Daisy's in good shape. So is Dave the Brave. So is Graham Young. There's a good chance that somebody's going to take a live 10 out of 10 tonight. Fantastic. Good luck, Dave the Brave. Good luck, Graham Fraser. Good luck, Daisy Vleeland. Here's the asshat. Of the 24 new distilleries listed in the 2018 Malt Whisky Yearbook, that is specifically the Malt Whisky Yearbook I was using as my reference when I started the vPub. When I started the quiz at the end back in 2017, it was this book. And there were 24 new malt distilleries listed in it. There's more than 40 now, but 24 back in the day. But back then in 2017, when the vPub kicked off, how many of those 24 distilleries had released whiskey? So when the vPub started, of the new distilleries in the Malt Whisky Yearbook, how many of them had released whiskey? I need to point out that Kilchoman and Glengyle is not part of the new distilleries selection. It's everything since then that's in the new distilleries selection. So, back in 2017, the amount of new distilleries that had released whiskey when I started was about the same number as A. The same number as operational malt distilleries on the island of Islay. Or about the same number as B, the same number as operational distilleries north of 8 Doors Distillery. Or about the same number as C, operational Highland region distilleries that are south of the Isle of Skye. I should also add a qualifier in there, sorry. For C, it needs to be Highland Island distilleries that are south of Skye. So that is every distillery that's located on an island that is south of Skye. Now that would mean that we do not include Islay in that, because that wouldn't be Highland Island region, would it? It would be Islay region. So we're looking for island distilleries that are south of Skye. Graham Fraser is saying, what? I put it to you, Graham. This is the asshat. So you have to figure out roughly how many of those new distilleries were releasing genuine whiskey, not spirit drink, not new make, but whiskey when the vPub started. Out of 24, how many were releasing whiskey? Is it the same as the amount of operational distilleries on Islay? You roughly know how many of those are, don't you? Operational distilleries north of 8 Doors, I think you've got a pretty good idea what that number is. Come on. Operational island distilleries south of Skye is harder, I think. But chewing over it for a wee minute, you might zone in on a number. Ian Williamson is saying B, just a guess. Sugar Kitty thinks it's B, as Bruce Bernard also thinks it's B. Whiskey Total is saying B, as well as Stephen Gibson. Rod Graham is saying Wolfburn A. Well, I don't know if it helps you, big guy, but Wolfburn is south of 8 Doors. 8 Doors is the most northerly on the Scottish mainland. Mikey Hay is saying, I wanted to get 7 out of 10 to honour your anniversary, but I'm not going to even manage that. Mikey, I'm so sorry, buddy. It's so good to have you in. Mikey, it feels like you've been here from right at the beginning, and you're still here, fella. I hope you and the family are doing well. I hope life down in London is treating you well too. Good to have you, fella. Okay, Roddy Graham is saying B, I suppose. I don't know if it's going to help you, but operational distilleries on Islay today is 10. Operational distilleries north of 8 Doors is 5. And operational Highland Island distilleries that are south of Skye is also 5. So if you answered B or C, I think I've been a wee bit generous tonight. You're spot on. Wolfburn, Daftmill, Avenjarrick, Ailsa Bay and Strathearn had all released whiskey by the time the vPub went live in 2017. Distilleries south of the Isle of Skye that's on an island, I'll be doing this from memory, so I'll probably make a mess of it. Jura, Lochranza, Lag. What am I missing? Tobermory. And one more. I'm going to have to cheat and look at the map at the back, cheating on my own quiz. What am I missing? South of the Isle of Skye on an island. Of course, it's Tyree is the other. So there we go. If you answered B or C, you get a wee 10 at the quiz at the end. Oh, sorry, if you're one of the ones that was on a 9 out of 9. How are you doing? How are we doing? Daisy Leland answered a B, and she got a 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Really chuffed to hear that. Sugar Kitty on a 9, so close, buddy, so close. Always scoring terrifically well in the quiz at the end. How else are we doing? Graham Young is screaming 10, 10, 10. Well done, Graham. Well done, my friend. So good, and congratulations to you. And Dave the Brave is celebrating. All three of you managed it. Yes, finally, a 10 out of 10. See, it's possible. Falsgraph is saying, yeehaw, thanks, Roy, 9 out of 10. He's chuffed about it. John is celebrating, getting a pass mark on a 5 out of 10. 8 out of 10, a strong finish for Hell's Woods, saying strong finish. Happy with that. And Peter Lee is saying you're too generous. Well, it depends, Peter. How was your score at the quiz at the end? And Matthew Reinke is saying 4 out of 4. Now I just need to watch the replay and go for a... Excuse me, Matthew. A 1 out of 6 for a pass mark. Absolutely. I hope you do a hell of a lot better than that. Snuck in with a 10 out of 10, says Graham Fraser. Not sure how. Fantastic, Graham. Well done. Congratulations again, buddy. Peathead lag is Lowland. Oh, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. The fight goes on whether or not lag is actually Lowland or a Highland Island. They self-refer to as Lowland. It's interesting to see what they actually list it as in this book, in the Malt Whisky Yearbook at the end. They actually do. Lowlands, South Arran. So you know what that means, and I don't think it's going to be incidental. If I mess up any of the questions throughout the quiz at the end, it's a freebie for everyone, and everyone gets the point. I don't think it's going to change the results of the 10 out of 10 tonight, but regardless, 4 of you, I think, at least did very, very well with or without that. Listen, I'm very grateful to you all, whether you consider yourself a guide or a coach or an evangelist or somebody who's passive and doesn't really think about those things. Maybe you'll have the opportunity one day to inspire somebody else to pick up a glass of whiskey and drink for flavour over alcohol consumption, to taste over drinking. Maybe you'll inspire someone else to slow down in order to appreciate the things that's in a glass of whiskey and spills into the rest of their life and smell other things, what they're eating, what they smell, what they taste, what they enjoy everywhere. In all the ways that whiskey has enhanced our life over the years, maybe you've got the ability to show someone else that that's a possibility for them too. Regardless of whether you consider yourself a guide or not, remember that there are people that are whiskey curious, itching to come into the scene at every moment. And I think it's incumbent upon us all, whether or not we want to guide them or welcome them in or coach them or sponsor them or whatever, it's incumbent upon us all to keep whiskey as accessible as possible, as inclusive as possible, and as welcoming as possible. I know that you guys are doing a good job of that. Pete had to say, with that, I call it a day and hit the sack. As usual, thanks for organising. Thanks for the last 7 years, he's saying. He said, Aquaviti, all you do. See you next time, Slancheva. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, big guy. Hellswood is saying, thanks for another fab vPub. Off to Edinburgh Sunday till Tuesday. Hope to grab a dram or two with barflies while there. Wonderful stuff. I hope you have the best of times, Helen. Tony Nelson is saying, yet another and a wonderful way to finish off a wonderful Thanksgiving. Aquaviti, happy anniversary. Thank you, Tony. You've been here from the beginning. John Ginger Genius is saying, night, everyone. Jimmy Legg is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 57 months and saying, not believing what you say. Nate, doesn't stop me loving you, I think he's meaning. I love you too, big guy. Thank you. And Falsgraph is saying, thanks, Roy Aquaviti. May you be able to go on for at least another 7 years with this. Another 14 would be even better. I'll drink to that, Klaus. And Daisy is saying, thanks for another great vPub. Wouldn't want to miss any for the world. Thank you, Daisy. And Bruno Martins is saying, good evening, Roy. Good evening, Bruno in Portugal. Let's raise this wee glass of 30-year-old. Let's raise a glass to the last 7 years for 7 years to come. And if it's more, so much the better. I'll remind you all until next week, you're very dearly loved. Slancheva. Terrific stuff.